Greetings, chess fans. I can't believe that we are here because in this video I will deliver my 50th episode of my GM Neiksans bootcamps. And it does feel quite a special milestone because when I started my content creation in 2020, just as the COVID started, I didn't really expect it's going to take it this far. And yet here we are. And this is going to be an anniversary edition. There's going to be a special twist. I'm going to talk about it a bit later. And in this episode, we're going to talk about Queen's Gambit, the client variation, the exchange variation. So it actually has a very, very long name. Some people use a different name, the Carlsbad structure. And by the way, I already have made a bootcamp about the Carlsbad structure. I did this 4 years ago, I think, or 5 years ago. But it was mainly meant to focus on the structure and the ideas. And I think that for you, it would be really good to go back, rewatch that bootcamp after this one, and then compare how my understanding, at least I hope so, has evolved to what I said 4 years ago. So this bootcamp is going to feature of 5 main parts. There's obviously the introduction. I'm going to show you the ideas, but the other parts are, let me first start with what is the Queen's Gambit, the client exchange variation all about. If black plays e6, knight c3, typically he plays knight f6, we play c takes on d5, e takes on d5, and bishop g5. That's what we want to do. Our idea is to play e3, bishop d3, and then there's all kinds of ideas for white. And in the first part, we are gonna deal with the main continuation. For example, if black plays something like bishop e7, we play bishop d3, we play knight f3. I will explain why knight f3 is played and why not knight g to e2, which is going to be the second part. For example, here you can play knight to g to e2, how your plans change, and again, what is the reason for this move order. In the next part, we are going to talk about what happens if black plays bishop f5. He tries to kind of solve the problem of this last square bishop, because this is one of the early reasons why we play bishop d3 to stop him from doing that, and he does it anyway. And I'm going to explain what to do here. Should you play the main continuation queen f3, which pretty much doubles black's pawn structure, or instead there's something else. Part number 4 is the delayed knight f6, which also is kind of popular for black. Sometimes black plays bishop e7 to avoid this Carlsbad structure with bishop g5, because now there wouldn't be any pin. And here I'm going to focus on c takes, and bishop f4. And finally, the 5th part will be the other setups for black. And here I focused on stuff like, for example, after bishop g5, c6, what happens if black plays bishop d6, which is a bit different setup. What happens if black plays bishop e7, bishop d3, bishop g4. The idea, again, is to fix the placement of the last square bishop and get it to g6. And also I'm talking about what happens if black delays the c6 move and plays bishop e7, e3, shoot castle, and eventually pushes the c5 pawn. All right, now this is the plan for our bootcamp. And historically, I think it's also quite important to understand why this setup was chosen by white. The reason is that it was around 1920s. This is when Alexander Alekhine, Jose Raul Capablanca, Aaron Nimzovich, they were the best players in the world. Also of course, Emanuel Lasker was still around, obviously a very dangerous player. And around that time, Capablanca was definitely setting the tone for the high stage of chess, and he was really good at those Queen's Gambit accepted lines, meaning, let's say, if in similar positions Black is allowed, for example, let's say white plays knight f3, black is allowed to take it. Here, black will play a6, he will play b5, he will play c5, and relieve the tension from the center. So Kappa was really good at this. And that's why people started to, research some other opportunities. What is there else to explore? And I don't really have an exact year when this happened, but there's a very famous tournament in 1923 when literally everyone started to play c takes on d5. And the idea of c takes on d5 is that white takes away this opportunity for black to take on c4, play a6, b5, c5. This is where Capablanca was so good at. And after e takes on d5, now there's no more attention in the center. White can pin the knight, play e3, and only then later they would formulate the first real ideas. And who could have thought that this really is going to turn out to be a very popular system for white, and it's quite playable also today. All right, so before I delve into some more details and the actual theoretical part, as I already said at the very beginning, there's a twist to this video. And for the first time, during the creation of my boot camps, I had help. Yeah, so normally I am working myself alone on my laptop, and like I'm typically spending on creation of the PGN of the bootcamp about 3-4 days, full entire days, sometimes a week, while I create this source file that I can present to you, because I have to really get into those operations, understand it properly. So like I already said, this time I had help, and the help is right there. Do you see this board? So I would like to show you something. While working on my anniversary bootcamp, I spent a considerable amount of time reviewing the lines on my Millennium T2 Supreme board, and it became one of the most valuable aspects of my preparation process. You see, when you're studying openings for hours, it's very easy to fall into this passive engine clicking in front of the computer instead of understanding the positions by working through them physically on the board. What I really liked about the setup is that it helped me to slow down, visualize the ideas more clearly, and go step by step through the move orders. This board combines that classic over-the-board feeling with modern online play. It's primarily designed for playing online on a physical board, which makes the entire experience feel much more immersive than just moving pieces on a screen. And honestly, the build quality of the board and the pieces feels really excellent. This bootcamp episode was created with the support of Millennium. If you're interested in checking out the T2 Supreme board, I will leave a link in the video description along with a discount code to make it a bit more accessible. All right, now let's go back to some theory. Let's talk about some typical ideas from either side. Because we took on d5, this changes the pawn structure quite dramatically. And our typical idea, as already said, is to play this e3 and bishop d3. So we give our both bishops very good diagonals. And black is trying to solve this in some way. c6 is the typical response for black in this position. And I think here the move order is quite important, because you can't really automatically play knight f3. I mean, you can do that, obviously, but you're not going to get any opening advantage, because black will include h6 to push back your bishop. Let's say you play it here, you keep the pin alive, black plays bishop f5, and the thing is, you are not supposed to allow this bishop for black to land on f5 without any problems. Meaning, you could play, of course, e3, bishop e7, bishop d3, takes, show castle, but objectively, white has no advantage whatsoever. And this is the reason why in this opening, very often white starts with the move e3 and stops black from playing bishop f5. And like I already said, bishop f5, queen f3 is an entirely different story. And not so many players from black really like to play like this, even though the reputation for black in this position is a very good one. We're going to talk about this separately. Black here pretty much has to know that the main idea for him is to include an early h6 as early as possible. And the reason is as follows. If we would play bishop h4, then in some lines, let me go straight forward with bishop e7, bishop d3, should castle, knight f3. Maybe I'm going to talk about it in the next part. Black reserves this opportunity to play knight e4, which is a very, very important idea for the structure. And this early h6 is so important for black because if black includes this right now, then we might not have an opportunity to play a bishop f4, which kind of walks away from the pin. And the bishop on f4 for these structures is a very good placement for the dark square bishop, but it allows black to immediately solve the problems of this last square bishop. And I think this part is quite important for you to understand. You see, you don't have access to queen f3 anymore because the bishop on f4 is blocking, and also there's no pressure against the knight on f6. And if black mixes this up and he plays, for example, bishop e7, now you have more opportunities because you obviously start with bishop d3. You take away bishop f5. If you mix it up, you see you play knight f3 or you play rook c1, bishop f5. Queen f3 no longer has any power because the black's last square bishop is going to walk away. That's why we play bishop d3 here, short castle, and now we can play knight f3. Again, this is something we are going to talk about a bit later because if black plays h6, instead of the automatic bishop h4, we can retreat the bishop f4 with the key idea that knight e4 for black, it's really hard to carry out, right? So in a nutshell, the big idea for black is to first and foremost to understand that early h6 is quite important. And I have a feeling that not so many players know it. Before we delve into this next big part about knight f3, I would like to also talk about some transpositions because obviously the move orders can be many. And I think that this is one of the most classical ways how we can get there. Let's say we play, once again, d4, d5, c4, e6, knight c3, knight f6. So many people play this from the black's perspective, then c takes on d5. I mean, black could play knight takes on d5, which is entering the territory of the semi-Tarrasch. It is pretty good defense for black, but I think that with this move order, this is the most dangerous way for black to play because white has this very annoying idea to play rook b1, which deals with black c takes on d4, c takes on d4, and bishop b4 check. And then white keeps this dark square bishop for some long-term ideas to attack black at the king side. Yeah, so this rook b1 is quite dangerous, even though I believe that black ultimately is fine with knight e5 because I'm also playing myself the semi-Tarrasch. So there's this move order, but some really smart players, they're playing this way. They like to play knight f6. This is very common at the competitive level. They're just avoiding the queen's gambit exchange variation. And now if you play a c4, black plays e6, and now knight c3 runs into the Nimzo, and the Nimzo defense has a very good reputation for black. And most players who are playing with a white color, I'm talking about the competitive level, they're typically starting with knight f3. They're avoiding the Nimzo. And after queen c2, I think d5 here for black is the main concentration. Black is doing fine. So queen c2 is like the lazy approach for white. If you want just to have a quiet game, have the bishop pair, you want to play a3. Maybe I'm going to make a separate bootcamp about this to make it a bit more complete approach to you. And if black here will play d5, then we're again in the territory of c takes on bishop g5. Maybe also I should mention that if you want to be smart and play with the move orders and keep the tension in the center, once again, black can play d takes on c4. That's why I think including the c takes on d5 is quite important. And if you're thinking being very aggressive with the spin and playing e4, according to an engine, this is not so great because black has a pretty nice shot, b5. This is Stockfish's top choice. e5 quite doesn't work because of h6 and g5. It's a very, very common idea in the Botvinnik variation of the Slav, and this feels like a better version for black. And after knight takes on b5, black plays check. Here he plays c5. He's very aggressive in the center, and finally e5 is met with the key move queen d5. E takes on f6 is going to be queen g5, and black is better, right? So it quite doesn't work for white, and instead if white plays the modest move e3, then black plays, I think it was c5, bishop c4, takes, bishop e7 here, and we're entering the territory of the IQP. By the way, I have made a bootcamp about it from the white's perspective, from the black's perspective, where black is doing great. And some experts believe that the bishop on g5 for the IQP is early. But, I mean, Stockfish doesn't really care and says that it's still fine for white. White is tiny bit better, but it's an entire game, and this is where I think you should really study the IQP structure. And again, for this very reason, white takes on d5. But the thing is, if you don't like the Nimzo, you don't like knight c3, bishop b4, you can't get to this setup. And some people have been trying to play knight f3, d5, and let's say knight c3, but this gives black a whole pool of choices. Like black can take on c4, black can play bishop b4, the Rogozin variation. There's so many variations here that black can choose. He's not obliged to play for this bishop e7, and actually I think that you might have some difficulties to recreate the same structure because you're committed to knight f3, and black might fix the problem of this last bishop very quickly, like this, bishop f5. And sometimes you might try to postpone him playing bishop f5 by playing queen c2, but black typically plays g6, and again, you're not in time. So you see, not always you can recreate this structure. And some players, sometimes in blitz games, they are trying to fool the opponent by playing bishop g5 and expecting that black's going to respond with d5, and sometimes black does this, takes, knight c3. We transpose to this position. But the thing is, bishop g5, it's not a great move because black can play h6. I think it's a bad version of Trompovsky for you to take on f6. And if you play bishop h4, there's a couple of Doxwell weaknesses at the queen set for white, like black is going to play g5, queen b6, and the pawn on b2 is vulnerable, and it's just not a great choice for white. You can't get there with this move order. You could try to play Trompovsky with bishop g5, but to be honest, after d5, I just do not see how you can transpose to those positions, because again, after c4, black is not obliged to play e6. Black can play knight e4, be aggressive, and you're playing a bad version of the Trompovsky. There is one line how many players are still getting to the exchange variation, and this typically happens after d4, d5, c4, c6, the Slav variation, knight f3, knight f6, and knight c3. The point is, if black plays e6, which is one of the main lines in the semi-Slav, you can play bishop g5. If black plays knight d7, you can play c takes on d5, and now c takes on d5 for black is a bit dubious because the knight should be on c6, not on d7. Like, engine probably is going to hold everything, but typically black plays c takes on d5, and after e3, even though we are committed to the knight on f3, black is not ready to play bishop f5 because his knight is blocking the view. You're playing bishop d3, and you're carrying out all the ideas. And this is, by the way, quite a popular move order at a competitive level. But there's a couple of problems. the problem number one is, first, let's go back to this position. After knight c3, black can just take on c4, and it's one of the big lines of the Slav, where you have to play something like a4, bishop f5, knight e5, etc. Big theory which has nothing to do with the exchange variation of the Queen's Gambit client. This is basically Queen's Gambit accepted. And the second part is, after e6, bishop g5, black can once again take on c4 and enter either the Botvinnik variation or the Moscow variation, meaning after e4, b5, e5, h6, super huge theory, which goes like move 40, whatever. So it really depends if you know this stuff. And if you already do, then maybe you can try to also get to the Queen's Gambit client exchange variation with this move order, but I have no guarantees that your opponents will comply. They might go for this d takes on c4, and you're not going to get your Queen's Gambit, the client exchange variation on the board. So what I would maybe recommend to you is that you are also playing some Nimzo, meaning if black plays knight f6, c4, e6, you're playing knight c3, you're hoping that your opponent wants to play d5, then you're playing c takes on d5 and bishop g5, and after bishop b4, here you study one of the lines of the Nimzo. And queen c2 is the lazy approach, f3 is the hyper-aggressive move, e3 is the standard move, there's knight f3, there's g3, there's many setups. Maybe for the Catalan lovers, g3 is a pretty interesting try, and some high-class players like Fabiano Caruana, they're playing sometimes exactly like this. All right, so that's about the move orders. About the plans, there's typically the three main plans for white. Once again, we go to this position after e3. Let's say black plays bishop e7. We play bishop d3, castle. So let's say we play knight f3. You're typically playing at the pawn minority. We are using this term in chess, pawn minority, pawn majority. We are talking about the flanks, meaning at the king side and the queen side. Let's say here's the queen side. As you can see, we have less pawns. We have 3 pawns, black has 4. So this means we can play at the pawn minority. And the same applies for the king side right here, where we have a pawn majority. And of course, black can do exactly the same. So the typical idea for white in this position is to castle short. Let's say castle short. Sorry, what I'm doing here. Castle short, play rook b1, play b4, b5. That's the classical idea for white. Why white is doing this? We want to create a weakness on a c6. So essentially, if black himself at some point commits something like b6, you already don't need to do that, because the pawn on c6 is a weakness and you don't need to push those pawns forward. The big idea is to create this weak pawn on c6, and we're going to talk about in the next part. The second idea for white is to play knight g2 e2, which is going to be another part. And this very often comes with an idea to play f3 e4. There is another idea for white, and sometimes you can go for a kingside attack, which is some sort of h3, g4, knight g3, queen f3. But it really depends when you can do this. And there are moments when, instead of this f3 e4 or h3 g4 ideas, white castles the long side. But the way I understand it, it's crazy for you to castle if black has this Dutch bishop on the board. If the Dutch bishop is gone, then castling longside becomes an opportunity, because black is going to push those pawns very aggressively forward, and having the presence of the Dutch bishop makes it really dangerous for you. So if you have a position where black trades off the Dutch bishops, you can definitely think about castling long, because then him pushing those pawns at the queen side, it's not going to feel so dangerous. So those are the main ideas for white. For black, black typically is playing at a king side, meaning you see he has this pawn chain, which shows him like in a direction. It shows that he has to play at the king side. You have the same thing. You have the pawn chain here, which shows you're typically supposed to play at the queen side. But obviously, it's not so simple. And black wants to get rid of this bishop somehow. You're going to, most of the cases, cast the short side, and he wants to attack your king at the king side. This is where he's going to focus his pieces. Sometimes he's going for the c5 push, like either b6, c5, or c5 immediately, but the c5 push typically happens if white is committed to f3. It's like a signature move, meaning as soon as you are playing f3 and you have your ideas to play e4 or sometimes even g4, there's this crazy idea I didn't even mention, black very often meets it with c5, so that after d takes on c5, whatever capture on c5, you have a weak pawn on e3. Also, there's like a common rule for the Caspet structure that both knights best belong for white on d3 and for black on d6. It's like a common understanding because you see the knight on d3 for you, it protects all the critical squares, it looks forward really nicely, and also for black, the knight on d6, it guards this critical weakness on b7, it guards against b4, b5, it attacks the c4 and e4 squares, and yeah, it just it just controls all of these surrounding squares really nicely. And don't be surprised if black plays something like 94, 96, or 98, 96. He trades off this dark with bishop, and then he tries to have his game. All right, so I hope that about the introduction, it's more or less clear. It's been around for 100 years. It's very popular at the highest level. But now let's talk about some very principal core ideas. And this is where the first real part starts. We're going to talk about the classical setup. What happens if white plays knight f3? So the starting moves are the same. c4, e6, knight c3, knight f6. We play c takes on d5. We relieve the tension from the center. We are playing the spirit of some anti-Capablanca chess because, like I already said, he was very big on this. d8 on c4, a6, b5, c5, e takes on d5, and bishop g5. There you go. So we're pinning this knight. Probably I should start with some really basic stuff. There's a kid's trick, meaning black loves to do this at some very low level, club level, meaning knight e7, you cannot win a pawn. Yeah, so knight takes on d5, knight takes on d5, bishop takes on d8 is met with bishop b4 check, you're dropping the queen. Yeah, so obviously don't do that. You're down a piece. You shouldn't do that. But the big idea of the move bishop g5 is to apply pressure against the pawn on d5. And I think that here for black playing some Tarrasch with c5, it literally makes no sense because the pawn on d5 will be vulnerable. I didn't really check it deeply. I think you can just play e3, then try to take on c5. So for black to play any Tarrasch with c5, I think it makes sense for him to get rid of this bishop from the h4 d8 diagonal, play h6 bishop f4, and only then play c5. Yeah, otherwise, with the bishop on g5, it makes no sense at all. Typically, black plays c6. Again, like I already said, we're going to talk about the other systems if black avoids playing c6. And by the way, if black plays knight e7, nothing really dramatically for you changes. You can just play e3. You keep the threat of knight takes on d5, and all the same ideas for you to apply. I think that black has to start with c6 or bishop e7 here. Now we play e3. And here we have several moves. Bishop f5, we are going to deal with this in a separate part of this bootcamp. Here black can play either h6 or bishop e7. And I have a feeling that many players from black, they don't even fully understand this move order. I think it's all about the placement of the light square bishop. The smart move for black is to play h6 right here. This is something I already said during the introduction. And why? Let me show you the difference. If black plays bishop e7 or knight b7, it doesn't really matter. Let's say he plays here, bishop e7, which is not the most accurate move order. Black wants to play bishop f5, the next move. So clearly we have to stop him. Some people like to play queen c2 to do it, but I think bishop d3 makes most sense because I'm not really sure about the queen's placement, but I'm sure that the last bishop belongs here. And let's say black here plays this idea of knight e7. So this move very often it signals that black wants to trade his last bishop on f5 at all costs. The big idea is here, g6, knight g7, and bishop f5. While keeping the king in the center. This is going to be a very big motive for black to trade his supposedly terrible light square bishop. Now we play knight f3, and the principle here is this. I think it should be very easy for you to remember. If you can retreat with the bishop on f4, then always play knight f3. It's easy to remember. Meaning, if black doesn't include early h6, always play knight f3. It's easy to remember. And we're going to talk about why knight f3 with the bishop at h4 is not that effective. So let's say we play bishop d3, black plays knight e7, we play knight f3. Black could try to trade off this dark square bishop with immediate knight h5, but I think that it's a bit early. He can do that. So we trade it. Actually, I think we could castle even the long side. It becomes an opportunity for you to play stuff like h3, g4, queen c2, long castle, because you see black doesn't have the dark square bishops anymore. Like, it's a very fighting choice, and maybe it's how you should play. But the simple castle is just fine. You play the typical idea of rook b1, a5. The big idea, we want to play b4, b5. And in case you're not sure, should you play a3, b4, b5, or play rook b1, b4, b5, always start with rook b1, because a3 just might be a waste of time. Actually, if you can play b4 right away, just play b4 right away. And there's going to be some lines when you can do that. So the key idea for you is to play b4, b5, and create weakness on c6. The big idea is not to play a3 or rook b1. The idea is to get the pawn to b5. And the question is, what's the fastest way for you to do it? So let's say you play rook b1, a5, a3. Obviously, we reinforce the idea. Black carries out his ideas, takes. And I suppose black has to meet this b5 in some way. And if he doesn't do this, like let's say he wants to trade his light square bishops, or prepare this knight g7, h3 is a very common move for these positions. We are getting to this position where black is always going to have some problems. Like, this pawn on c6 is an easy target. As you can see, you have one connected pawn, mainland basically, and black has two pawn islands. That's one, that's second. It's just a very easy game. Put all your pieces at the c file, pressure the pawn on c6. It's not the win, of course, but it's a very nice, pleasant, long-term pressure. But the point is, if you push b5, you have to be ready at all times that black will play c5. Walk past it. But now we have the so-called IQP pawn structure. This pawn on d5 is a weakness, the pawn on d4 is a great outpost, and you have some pressure. Another thing is, when you push b5, you have to be, I think it actually applies a bit more here. Like, let's say black plays g6, b4, a6, a4, let's say knight f6. You have to be ready that after b5, black might take with the c pawn and create an outside pass pawn. This is probably more of a threat in an rising endgame where black has an outside pass pawn, but in the middle game, you're always better. Because, again, black has three pawn islands. This is one island, the second island, third island. You have only two islands, the mainland and the pawn on b5. So, in theory, you're doing better, because even though he has this outside pass pawn, the pawn on d5 is an easy target. So this, this knight h5 is one way for black to trade this light square bishop. He could play b5 himself, and sometimes black is doing this. And I think that I'm not like super deep on in the nuances of these positions, but this idea for black, it works better if he has the dark square bishops on the board. He's thinking about putting his knight on c4, which you're not obliged to take, and it's not very effective for black with the white knight on f3. I think it more works with the white knight on e2, because then you can't prepare the idea to play knight e5 or knight e1, knight e3, knight c5. Like, this could be one of the ideas. You can play bishop e2, knight e1, knight e3, knight c5. eventually. Try to occupy the c5 square. With the knight on e2, it's a bit more difficult because knight e1, knight b3 might drop the pawn on b4 because the black queen on e7 is dropping. But again, like, these are just ideas, and I suppose in some very concrete positions, it really depends where your pieces stand. Sometimes you can play e4 push here and try to punish his weaknesses. So this b5 with the last square bishop left on the board with no dark square bishop, I think for black it's strategically a bit dangerous. Let's go back. Instead, like I already said, black could mix up the move orders here and play h6. But the difference is you don't have to play bishop h4 anymore. Since black, you see, black did not play early h6 right now. So he should have been included h6 right now. If he misses his opportunity, he goes here, and let's say he plays h6 here. First, let's have a look at this move order. Let's say he plays h6 here. You play bishop f4. And now you want to secure your dark square bishop with h3 and proceed with all the typical ideas. For black, this is a terrible position. In general, it's not a good position for black. And the only reason why black would want to go to this position is to have the knight h5 resource. He wants to trade off your dark square bishop, get himself the pawn majority, not the pawn majority, but the bishop, 2-bishop advantage, and try to outplay you in the long run. But in this position, typically, you want to put your bishop on e5. Because if black is going to take on e5, you have two very interesting opportunities. Both of them are fully supported by the engine. The opportunity number one is you take with the knight. As you see, you're attacking this knight on h5 by the queen. He walks away, you play f4. You play stuff like queen f3, probably short castle, even a long castle could be a thing, and g4, h4, g5, the pawn on h6 as a hook. It's an interesting game. But the second thing is that after knight x on e5, you can play d-x on e5. And now you see this knight cannot go back to the game. You want to kind of trap it, or even play knight e4, f4. And in most occasions, white is just better here. You want to play stuff like knight e4, f4, or maybe rook d1, e4. Sometimes probably you need to include h3. And there's very few positions when black is all right here. Very few. In most cases, d-x on e5 just gives you the advantage. So this h6, you play bishop f4, and again, if he plays castles, you immediately play h3. Now knight h5 is not effective, and you have a very good control of the center. And black's key idea is to play this knight e4, but he can't do it because your bishop is gone from this diagonal, and he cannot force some trades. We're going to talk about this in a moment. And yeah, let's say he tries to play this knight f8, castles, knight e6, here g6, which is a different route for him to get the knight on g7. Here, I think, again, you can carry out the same idea. You play the classical idea rook b1, because with the knight on f3, this is what makes most sense. You play b4, let's say takes, bishop f5. There's so many good players who play exactly like this from black. You play b5, you try to create a weakness, takes, knight f5, and here, I think we're quite happy to trade this dark square bishop for the knight. Takes, rook c1, there you go. It's a pressure forever. Like, you're about to put your knight on d3, somehow, I don't know, remove the queen, knight f4, knight e3, or the other knight could go to d3, double the rooks, put the knight on b4 or e5, black is suffering. He has no attack at the king side. And there's many famous games. And by the way, speaking about bootcamp PGN, it's going to be, I will be putting it up for a separate purchase. It's always been like this for my boot camps. You don't have to get it. If you want to get some deeper information about some of the lines, you can do that and then build from this PGN your own repertoire. But what I want to say is that I also included about 20 games with very short analysis of some typical core ideas that I think you should know as an extra, because I'm pretty sure I won't have the time to show everything in this bootcamp. I'll just focus on the main ideas. Let's go back a bit. And Yeah, so this, let's say instead of this knight e7, let's say here in this position. Now, black realized, oh, I was supposed to include h6. Yes, and he does it right now. Now we retreat to f4. You see, there's no knight h5. He castles short, and you can play knight f3. You can do that, and then you want to play h3, and again, knight h5 is bishop e5. It's a bit different move order. I mean, we talked about this. You can play like h3, you can take with a d pawn, you can play knight e5, you can play 4. All of these ideas are still okay for you, right? But I think that it's a bit smarter with this move order to play h3. I mean, why do we give black this opportunity to play knight h5 when we include early h3? And the way I see it, the only drawback for this for you would be that your king is in the center and black somehow opens up the position, but he can't because c6, c5 is coming with the loss of a tempo. I mean, if he does this, you just play knight f3. And there's going to be a separate discussion about this in one of the next parts. So you don't even have to take on c5 right away. And you're just having a beautiful coordination of the pieces at the king side. And that's why here, let's say he plays something like knight e7, here, rook e8, castles. You're never going to allow him to play knight e4. You can still play this, carry out your typical idea of b4, b5, or let's say he does something like this, here. We could even go for the kingside attack, like knight e5, f4, rook e1, and everything goes to the king side. Why not? Actually, here I think that with the dark bishops left on the board, your king is super safe. You could just maybe abandon the idea of playing b4, b5, and instead you're going for the king side attack because this is where you have the pawn majority, and all of your pieces are literally looking at the opponent's king. So why not? That's why I think that for black, he can misplay this position very easily. And he has to try to trade off some pieces somehow. And I suppose it's got to be this bishop d6. But now after bishop d6, of course, you can still play, of course, you can take it and you can play knight f3 and castles and carry out your typical idea with this rook b1, b4, b5. But here's one thing. You haven't castled short just yet. And black is committed to h6. And now you have an opportunity to play a bit improvised chess. And do you remember what I told you? That with the dark square bishops gone, you have an opportunity to castle the long side. And instead of doing this immediately, you can play queen f3, which is not going to be always an option for you, but now it is. And we are thinking very clearly about knight e2, g4, g5. Castle alongside if we have to. And there's a king side attack. If he takes it, we take with a queen. We play g4. You can toy with the move orders. Like, it's just an idea, but maybe the knight goes here. Maybe the knight goes here. Maybe you play g5, rook g1. Maybe you keep the king in the center for the time being. And what is black doing here? Because he's supposed to play c5, but you see he's already committed to c6. So any c6, c5 is coming with a loss of a tempo. What is just better here? Much better. It's a terrible position for black. And that's why I think that he can't easily do this. So he could play the classical way. Let's say he plays castles. I think that we probably have to play knight f3, but again, let's toy with the move orders. I think the h3 is the most accurate move. Let's say, once again, knight f3, h6, bishop f4. We want to play h3. We talked about this. Yeah, all of this is working just fine. But the thing is, I don't think that we have to do this. Let's play h3. So we're anticipating that black will want to trade off this dark square bishop, rook e8, knight f3, and there's a major difference. If black plays knight e4, that's the big idea. You don't have to trade the dark square bishops, because this is the classical idea for black. He wants you to trade on e7, he's going to take with a queen, put the bishop at f5, and he solves the problems. I think our dark square bishop is a bit stronger. So we go here. Let's say he goes here, queen c2, knight e7, and should castle. And there's some pressure. Even though black has managed to put the bishop at f5, he can't take on c3, the bishop at f5 is under attack. So it could be a bit unpleasant for black. I mean, this pressure against the pawn on e4. And You could, of course, toy with the move orders like knight of 3 is probably good. Like, you don't mind h6 and knight h5 because I show you the ideas. And he could still play knight e4. And we again retreated with the bishop. And now we have this position where you're playing the queen side. And again, you're better. Or instead of the knight e4, he could try to play rook e8, shoot castle, here, and again, h6, we're always going to play bishop f4. Yeah, and there's this trick that some people keep falling into this. So the trick is, after bishop f4, I think it's a very good idea for you to remember, black going to play knight h5. Boom. Knight x on d5 is a very, very famous trap. C takes on d5, bishop c7, you're winning the queen. This idea only works after you have castle short. If the king is on e1, you're going to miss a check and you can resign. So remember this trick. I think it's worthy to remember. And so many people have fallen for this. And you just want to play h3 next move to negate black's knight h5. And I think it's a good idea for you to keep this opportunity for black to fall into this, whatever the move order you get there. So this is one of the reasons why the queen on c2 stands so nicely. And of course, by the way, knight f4 is knight f4. So the knight on d5 not only attacks the c7 weakness, but it also protects the knight on f4. So black cannot really do this. The other moves, yeah, once again, bishop h4, it is a possibility, and we're going to talk about it with a different move order, but black's big idea here is to play knight e4. This is what he wants. This is why black includes early h6 to get to this position. And now the point is, if you take with e7, he takes with the queen, he keeps the knight on e4, and he plays knight f6 with bishop f5 to follow. And the best little you can do here is to take with e4. The difference is d takes on e4, queen e4, black is losing a pawn for no good reason. And there's this possibility for you to play this setup with bishop d3, rook e1, f3, and have some pressure. By the way, I have one game that I played myself on this line. I included this in the PGN, so you can replay it. By the way, I tried to select some games from the best players in the world, like Magnus Carlsen, Fabiano Caruana, Hikaru Nakamura, Arjun Rigaisi also was there. But I also included a couple of my games that I felt they highlight the ideas. So bishop h4, it kind of plays into the hand of the opponent. Like, it's not going to be a terrible idea, but if you can put the bishop at f4, do it. So instead of this, there's obviously many move orders like, like I think we talked about this already. Yeah, we talked that there's the knight e5, f4. Maybe I could show you this this idea a bit deeper. c5, black wants to fight for the control of the e4 square, and this is how black can drop the queen. Queen d4 is bishop h7 check. He can't do this. And it's just quite dangerous for black to play this, and you always have this king side attack going on. Yeah, so you're playing the king side, you're playing the queen side, you have some pressure. Like, if you're not convinced, to be honest, I thought that the easiest choice for you is always play d takes on e5. It feels more direct to me. Now d4, f4 to follow. f4, if he plays c5, you can take on e6. The pawn on d5 is going to be a weakness, so it's just an easy game. Like takes, f4, his king is weak, f5 is incoming, the pawn on d4, d4, some knight e4 stuff, and you're attacking with a lot of things, so I kind of like it. Maybe I'm not super accurate with the move orders, but I hope that you're getting the point. So this is the reason why black should play h6 right now. Now, h6 right now, and in case you forgot already, bishop f4 is bishop f5. You don't have access to queen f3. Some people like to play like this, like f3, bishop d6, g4, some Jabava London approach, whatever, like h4, or engine even says king f2, and you're just having some very improvised chess. But what you should know is that black has no problems here whatsoever. He's fine. So for this very reason, we play bishop h4. We keep the pawn alive, and black probably is going to play bishop e7. If he plays knight e7, it's probably going to be the same move order, but the nuance here, and this is where we're going to talk about it. If black has forced your bishop at h4, this is where we transpose a knight e2. We don't play knight f3, because knight f3, this allows black to carry out knight e4, either the short castle or immediately knight e4, takes, queen c2, knight f6, black ultimately is fine. You can do this. You can play rook b1, castles, b4, b5, whatever, but you should know, black has solved his opening problems. But the main move is going to be bishop e7. He wants to play bishop f5. We play bishop d3, or queen c2, bishop d3. Some people like to play like this, but to be honest, I don't understand this move, because I thought that building up this battery makes sense if you're targeting the pawn on h7. Now it's standing on h6, so why do we need a queen on c2? I quite don't understand it, but some people still play this. So I think bishop d3 makes sense. We take away this bishop's move. And the move bishop g4, I'm going to talk about it later a bit. It's a different move, how black tries to solve this problem of the last bishop. But black could immediately play knight e4, try to solve this problem of the pin, but I think it's a bit early. And this knight e4, I mean, at least according to an engine, it's not very effective if white can put the knight on e2. So I hope you understand the difference. If your knight is on f3, the bishop is on h4, black's knight e4 becomes highly effective, because after the eventual trade, your knight on f3 will have to move. You're losing a tempo. But if you can put the knight on e2, you're saving a tempo. You don't have to put the knight on f3 anymore. And that's why I think that here, knight e4 for black, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Meaning you take with the bishop, and you play knight e2. You see, knight f3, knight e2, you're saving a tempo. And I think that black might have some problems here, because if he, tries to complete his development with knight e7, knight f6, he's immediately running into some early problems. You see, the pawn on e4 is under attack. I don't know how he's planning to defend it. And if he castles short, you can attack the pawn. Again, the bishop f5, some knight g3 stuff is threatening. So let's say here. There's this idea for you to play in the center, rook d1, a d5. And you have some pressure, like his last bishop is a bit useless. You're going to have some quiet middle game with knight e4, rook d1, rook c1, or whatever. His bishop is very predictable. The pawn on e4 does nothing. It's just a very nice pressure. You're playing at queen side. But if he plays a 5, now he might have some problems with some Lasco weaknesses. Like here, you have an immortal knight. d5. Again, we might get something similar like takes. Okay, maybe not like this, but let's say here, some castle short. If he trades the knight on f4, you put there another knight. And again, you're playing against his Lasco bishop, which is a very easy game. Obviously, g5 is h6 on g6. Yeah, so it doesn't work because of the en passant capture. So knight e4 for black is playable, but it's a bit early. Black can't do this. If he plays knight e7, and he's basically waiting for you to play knight f3. Remember this, yeah, knight f3, knight e4. This is what he wants. We are playing knight e2 because the bishop already is committed to h4. And now for him playing knight h5 is a possibility, but in some lines, it's kind of a bit early because it gives you this extra opportunity to play h3, g4, and you can castle the long side because, again, you see the dark square bishop is gone. But probably the safer move is to play castles. You play queen d2. You want to play rook e1, f3. With the knight on e2, this is the classical idea. Black stops you here, knight f6, very accurate move order. And there's quite a famous game between Magnus Carlsen against Vladimir Kramnik. I think Kramnik in this position played knight f8, which is inaccuracy. And Magnus played knight c1 f3 and got a very, very nice position. I think he won that game, if I remember. And Black has to know this super accurate move order here. Yeah, like knight e4, and I think actually I have this line in different move orders where bishop e1, knight e4, takes, knight c3, h3. There's some pressure for white. Actually, I think I'm going to show you this a bit later. So this knight h5 is always there, so don't be surprised. But if he plays castles, you can play knight e2. And this is what you should do. So this is what we're going to talk about the next part. But I would like to show you what happens if you play the classical knight f3. Again, very big difference. Your bishop is on g5 or the bishop is on h4. Very big difference. Because black immediately plays knight e4. That's the big idea. And here, by the way, for him, playing knight e7 is not the most accurate move order. Because we are going to play queen c2 first. He goes here, here, and now you got this this position I was talking about that I played myself in one of the games. So a bit, no, actually I think it was a bit different. I see I have mixed up myself the move orders. I think it was knight h4, queen h4, bishop d3. But here I have another line. Bishop d3, rook e1, h3. Black has some problems with the coordination. Knight e5, f4, and again you have this chance to organize a king set attack. I mean, you can still do this, but for black, the knight e7 is not very accurate, and he plays knight e4, and the point is, bishop g3 is just equal. You have no advantage here. Bishop e4 is not accurate. Now it's not accurate because takes here, black plays f5. He actually has a very good chance to get better. You're a bit slow with the idea to get the knight to f4. I know this is the big idea, but your knight on d2 is just poorly placed for this position, so don't go here. And finally, you have to take on e7. Again, this is not good. Let me show you why. Takes, knight e2, f5, here. Black simply is better in this position. And that's mainly because of your silly knight on d2. It's very, very poorly placed for this position. Even though you have a beautiful knight on f4, you have to develop the ability to think about the larger picture, and your knight on f4 is really bad. So we castles, bishop f5, and yeah, like knight e5. This is so dry position. There's nothing happening here. And if you play queen c2, knight e7, black is about to solve all of his opening problems. I suppose you want to play b4, you do this, and this is where a couple of more pieces disappear from the board. You have nothing here. Like b4, a6, a4, knight e4. The final thing is, again, let's remember what we talked about, the timing of the b5 push. Black wants to put the knight on d6 and control all of your breaks in the center. Actually, the engine already kind of favors black here. And now b5 would be really bad timing because of c takes, a takes, and a5. So this is something we should remember. This is not the threat in the middle game. But when you're approaching closer the endgame, the outside pass pawn and black's knight on d6 could be a very dangerous combination. But to be honest, even a takes, rook a3 doesn't look very good to you, because rook b3, there's some crazy tactic for black. Look at this, c5. You can't take it, knight c5, and rook a3, c4. And black is winning, according to an engine. He takes on a3, he has a pawn majority at the queen side, your pawns are doing nothing, and an engine says black is winning. So this is the very reason why in this position, if black plays smart, if he plays early h6, we have to play knight g2, knight g2 e2. So we play bishop d3, should castle, we play knight g2 e2, and this is something we're going to talk about the next part, because then black's knight e4 becomes not very effective. And if your opponent doesn't understand the move orders, and he plays, for example, bishop e7 or knight e7, let's say here, now after h6, this already is a bit late. You can play bishop h4, knight g2 if you really want, but now you have this opportunity to retreat with the bishop on a4. Remember, after knight f3, there's always the knight h5 idea. Remember the idea of bishop e5. Remember the idea of including h3 first, so that the bishop can escape. And remember that black typically tries to either play knight e4 or try to trade off his light square bishop through f5 square. And typically through f5, he tries to go with either g6, knight g7, bishop f5, or the other idea is knight h5, g6, knight g7, and then trade it on f5. All right, so this is the end of the first part. Now let's have a look at the next one, where white plays knight g2. All right, let's continue. So the second part, everything about knight g5. Here, by the way, if black plays bishop e7, bishop d3, knight b7, like this, you can play knight g2 right now. Like if you're a big fan of knight g2 after this part and you're going to decide that this is what you want to do against black's setup, be my guest. You can absolutely do this. But the point is here, there's a nuance. So castles, black plays rook e8, which is like a typical move. He either preps knight e4, which, I mean, against the knight on e2 is suboptimal, but the big idea maybe is to play knight f8, knight e6, knight g7, try to rearrange the pieces. With the knight on e2, the big idea for you is to play f3. But the point is, if you do it right now, you want to play f3, you want to go for the c4 push. It's already a pretty common knowledge for black that he wants to organize some counterplay at queenside with b5. And now e4 early is going to be not going to working because black is perfectly ready to meet this, like takes, there's some knight e4, there's some tactical tricks. So your center is really vulnerable. And when you're going for the e4 push, very often you have to make a lot of preparation moves. Like you have to include a bishop on h4, bishop f2, h3 to stop it against the knight g4 ideas. Only then you can play e4 like this. Black plays a6, he wants to play c5, because remember, I told you this at the very beginning, if you play f3, black's common idea is to play c5, right? So let's say king h1, just to walk away from some checks, diagonals, c5, knight c5, and even though we have an IQP position on the board, meaning black has a weak pawn on d5, you have seemingly great outpost on d4, the pawn on e3 is a weakness, and according to an engine, this position is just dead equal. There's nothing here. That's why I think that what we can do, we can try to improve on this idea. And if black's big idea is to play b5, I think it's very interesting for you to play a4, which is a bit unusual for the structure, but our idea is we want to gain space at a queenside. And if he doesn't react to this, we play a5, we want to play a6, we want to create a weakness on c6. It might still work here. And after a6, we are a bit maneuvering with the pieces. Don't rush with f3, because I think that if you come into f3 very early on, it gives your opponent a lot of information. So I think it makes sense to start with the moves that you are going to have to play anyway for the setup. So how about h3? It's a very useful move for you to control the g4 square. Let's say black goes here, bishop h4. If black plays this idea of g6, and let me tell you this, so many people get this wrong because they want to get knight g7, bishop f5, and trade off the light square bishops. But with knight g2, it very often just doesn't work for black, because now you play f3, and if black plays knight g7, you walk away, you're preparing the e4 push, and after bishop f5, black doesn't accomplish anything because you just throw e4 in his face. You grab center, you're about to play e4, e5, and you're going to play the pawn majority at kingside. For example, takes, bishop e6. One of the big common ideas of this position, again, we could talk about the proper way to play it out. The big idea is to play e5 and not e4. Of course, the move order really matters. Maybe what I'm doing is not ideal, but the thing is, you see, you're controlling some critical Darkswell weaknesses around the opponent's king, and this could facilitate your attack. But to be honest, I think that here you can improve your position something like knight f4 first. Yeah, and only then play e5. I'm just telling you what's the idea. So g6 for black, it's a bit early. And if he tries to trade off again this bishop, like we already know this maneuver from a different line, we take, and we can try to fight for those Darkswell weaknesses at queenside. Knight a4 looks very logical. We're trying to control these weaknesses here. Let's say black plays g6. Here Engine comes up with some crazy rook a3 maneuver. Be ready to lift the rook on the third rank, apply some pressure. Let's say black goes for this last with bishop trade. Knight f6, bishop f5 is inevitable. We play knight c5, knight e6, takes, knight c3, knight a4, knight c5, and he's not still there. You definitely have some pressure. According to an Engine, it's not a big deal, but I would say that white is pressing. Let's say something like this, here, and find the right moment to play knight c5, and most likely at some point you're going to have to play at the pawn majority at kingside. Maybe you can try to get a position, like, I don't know how to properly set it up, like this. Something like this. You take for the b pawn, and now you see it basically feels you have an extra pawn at the kingside. Perhaps try to trade off the light square bishops, double the heavy pieces here to b file, attacking the pawn on b7, or go for some f4, g4, whatever kingside attack. It's not a lot, but it's something, at least. And we have to go back to this position. So this a4 is very interesting move. And the point is, if black responds with a5, which kind of makes sense because he fixes this weakness on b4, now I think playing f3 makes a lot of sense. So I think that including this a4, a5 benefits to you because he doesn't have b5 anymore. And if at some point he plays c5, it seriously weakens the b5 square. So we are immediately talking about stuff like knight b5. Thank you for the square. We can focus on the queen side. Forget about the e4. I don't think e4 here is relevant anymore. And we just play positional chess. And that's why I think that black shouldn't do this immediately. And if he tries to, again, apply some pressure against your center, anticipate your e4, you want to play e4. But again, the key to the success is the proper build-up. I think retreating with the bishop at h4 makes sense. Otherwise, he might think about trapping your Darkswell bishop. And I don't think you want to trade it for the knight on f6. So we retreat. We retreat, some waiting moves, bishop f2. And what is black doing here? Because we just want to play queen d2, some rook move, rook e1, rook d1, and play e4. I think this part is very clear. If black plays c5, he makes some weaknesses in the position. And if he goes for his bishop f5, we just play e4. Again, same idea. And again, black is pretty much always worse. Just watch out for some knight g4 stuff. Yeah, that's why I think this early h3 including is highly beneficial. But here, to be honest, I think you're still doing great. Yeah, some bishop c4 stuff, some e5, knight e4 stuff, and I think you're doing really great. So this a4 is like a modern touch of this position. But like I already said, black should include early h6 here. So he does it. We already discussed that bishop f4 doesn't work because black plays bishop f5. And it's not going to be like a super dramatic miss, but I mean, black immediately solves his opening problems. That's why we have to go here. Black plays here. We play a bishop d3. Yeah, and there was this moment when I think I already touched this in I think it was the first part. If black plays knight e7, this is a tricky move order. The big idea is that black wants to trade off the docks with bishops very quickly. Takes. Here we have to be quite accurate, because what black wants to do, he wants to play knight f6, control your pawn on e3 so that you can play f3, e4, or whatever, and then rearrange the knight to g6, knight g7, and eventually trade the last with bishops. For example, here castles will be inaccurate. Queen d2, black plays rook e8. There you go. So you see, you cannot play f3 anymore. And after rook e1, knight f6, knight e4, I think black is fine. But there's still one more nuance in this position. After takes, it's not knight f6, because that's like the most obvious move. Black wants to fix his knight, get the better square, but after f3, e4, white gets the better position. Quite paradoxical in this position. According to an engine, black plays c5 and is completely fine. He only plays knight f6 later. And the knight on h5 apparently still controls some key squares, meaning f3, e4, black might have access to knight f4. Yeah, so it's quite interesting, but yeah, apparently the knight on h5, it does something. And that's why this should castle here is a bit early. And we play queen e2 to control the e3 square. And if black is really careless, he castles short. You can remember that you don't have to castle short, because the docks with bishops are gone. Your opponent has a target on h6. And this is where you can start a Kingston attack. And it's crazy how things for black can escalate here. I mean, check this out. g4, knight f6, f3. This was the big idea. Like, the big idea at some point is to play not only f3, e4, but also f3, g4, which is very effective with the pawn on h6. And after rook e8, king f2. Everything is protected. And if black plays c5, you don't have to react to c5. You just want to do your stuff. You want to go here and here, maybe h4, g5. Everything goes at the king side. Let's say here, knight b6, b3 stopping knight c4, c5. Now c4 could be a threat, h4. And black is like close to lost. Can you imagine? Like, there's no attack for him at the center. Everything is rock solid. g5 just opens up some files, and for black it's very, very dangerous. So should castle is already a mistake for black. And if he tries to walk away with the knight, he wants to play knight e4, we stop him. f3, again, it's the same stuff. f3, g4, king f2, rook g1. White is winning. Just like that. Yeah, like with the king of f2, there's nothing the black can do about it. I think it's a very, very useful maneuver for you to remember. And instead, he has to play g6. This is not super obvious. But again, you play f3. Again, you want to play g4 stuff. And knight g7, e4, takes, e5, knight e4, long castle probably. And he has, again, so many docks or weaknesses. By the way, he can't castle short side because the pawn on h6 could be a target as well. So this is how black can get in trouble. But I think it's also for you to understand, it's important for you to understand the mindset. Most of the players that will be trying to take shortcuts at some point. And I think that your opponents might know that he has to trade the last with bishops on f5, but they might not understand with what move order. Should h6 be included? Should h6 not be included? Should I castle short? Can I play it here? Does it work against knight f3? Doesn't it work against knight e2? It's not so clear. All right, so let's focus on the main consideration. Bishop d3, black castle short. I think it makes most sense. And the main consideration here is knight e2. And when I was working on this bootcamp, I also noticed that some very good players that really like this move, bishop g3, to walk away from the knight e4 idea. Bishop d6 is knight e2. White is a bit better. It can castle alongside again, since the docks with bishops will be off the board. But after rook e8, knight f3, like, we have this position where we want to play h3 once again. Black tries to stop you, and again we have the same maneuver. Bishop e5, h3, here, d takes on e5, g6. We talked about this, yeah? Like here, rook d1, e4, whatever. The pawn on e5 is kind of safe. Like this is literally the best the black can do. Or maybe here also knight g7, queen c2, takes. You just develop a terrific initiative here. Pawn majority at the king side, the weakness on f6. Like very good prospect for you to have a great position. So this bishop g3 is something that I would definitely play a couple of times myself. Like it's a very interesting move order because once again you should know this. Knight f3 is going to be knight e4. You should already know that. That's why white tries to be smart about this, and he plays bishop g3, stopping this knight e4 while not being afraid of knight h5. And again, you could toy with the move orders because let's say opponent goes here. I didn't really check this, but this could work. But maybe also h3 works. h3 and knight f3 to go for the same position where black has difficulties to play knight e4. I think it makes perfect sense. But anyway, I mean, the part is all about knight e2, so this is what we're going to focus on. And here, black has to decide. What's he doing? Does he want to trade the dark square bishops or light square bishops? Does he want to play knight e4 or does he want to play some of the classic like rook e8? Because it's very easy for black to go wrong. For example, knight h5. The idea is right, but the moment is wrong because you're not castle short just yet. You might already remember something. Takes. We're not castling short. We play h3. Let's say black completes development. We play g4. We play knight g3, h4, g5. So what black is doing here, I suppose he could do it like this and this. But you're castling the long side. It feels very safe. Knight f5, bishop f5, h4, g5. There's no attack really at the queen side. C takes on d4. I did not check with what do you take. Actually, that would be a very good question. Maybe e takes on d4 makes sense so that the queen on c3 defends the knight. King b1, rook c1, h4, g5. It just feels you're faster. But again, if you're not really that kind of a player who likes to play like this, you don't have to do this. I'm just telling you there's this opportunity for you to immediately exploit the fact that black traded the dark square bishops and your king is still in the center. So you can go for this king set attack. But of course, you could just castle short and carry out all the common ideas. Nobody's stopping you, really. He could try to play knight e7, castles, rook e8. And now we use the same idea that we discussed before. So with the knight on e2, we want to play f3, but we expect that after f3, black is going to play b5. So what do? We'll play a5, a4 ourselves. We want to play a5, grab space. And again, if he plays a5, we prepare f3, king h1, bishop f2. We are going for this e4 break. And if black plays c5, he just weakens the b5 square. Like this, the knight is under attack, he has to walk back, rook d1. So what's he doing here? c4, bishop f5, e4 to follow at some point. His pawn majority at the queen side doesn't even feel. And maybe actually in this position, now that the center is closed, the big idea is to play e4, but how about we think about g4, rook g1, and g5 ideas? It looks very, very serious. So the big idea, of course, with the knight on e2 is to play f3, e4, but also g4 with the king on h1 suddenly becomes an opportunity because your opponent already has a target on h6, something that we can exploit. So after a4, if he plays knight e4, he ignores it. Yeah, so we trade it, we play a5. He might try to get to this setup, which is kind of his dream setup, but we have gained space at the queen side. Give up the bishop, play h3, stopping his last square bishop. And I think you're just better at the queen side. Focus there, maybe try to get the queens off the board. And yeah, so your position, the king set, feels very safe. And in this position, don't play any f3 stuff. There's no need for you to ignite any play. And it's still basically the the idea that you're playing with a good knight against a bad Lasco bishop. Let's go back a bit, and instead of knight h5, yeah, the main move is rook e8, clearly. Now, we are going to castle short, but there are some players. I think I saw Mamedyarov, which is not a big surprise because Shahriar Mamedyarov is one of the most creative players in the circuit. I think Mamedyarov played some games with f3 immediately without castling short, which kind of makes sense. I think it was a game Mamedyarov against Injic. I included this in the PGN of the bootcamp. And if I remember correctly, Injic responded with c5. Or was it with the knight e7? I really don't remember. Everything is so similar. But you can do this also, like this. But the thing is, black is able to play b5 and you didn't include a4. And yeah, he wants to play this b4, c5, like this, and this, and this. Not so clear. So I think that ultimately you can improvise with the move orders. And who knows, maybe here you can play a4 even. I mean, why not? But I think that the problem with a4 is that the black is still not committed to the knight on d7. And he could play a5, knight a6, knight b4. Which, I don't know, maybe it's not even a big deal. Like knight a6, knight b4, you put the rooks on c1, put the bishop on b1, and you carry out your ideas. But the knight on b4 is quite unpleasant. So I think it does kind of make sense for you to wait for his knight to commit to d7 before you play a4, so that knight b8, knight a6, knight b4 is not a thing, right? That's why I think that we should play Shokastle here. And again, black has a couple of choices. Let's say he plays a5, tries to anticipate your f3 with b5, whatever. But we can make these smart multi-purpose moves where we want to play this eventual f3, e4. But to be honest, we're not even revealing the cards. Let's say he plays knight e7. We kind of want to play f3, but let's just keep making good moves. Rook c1. Rook c1, queen d2, or queen c2. f3 is going to happen at some point. Maybe we're suddenly still going to play at a queen, so we knight a4, knight c5. So for black, it's also a bit difficult to play this, and it sometimes feels like a bit cat and mouse. And if he here commits to b5, that's a very big decision. As you can see, we did not play f3, and we are not going to play f3 anymore. So e4 is already not a possibility. We play the pawn minority. That's a weakness. That's a weakness. Rearrange the pieces like this. Knight goes to b3. Very common square. And here we start to capitalize on some weaknesses in black's position. And black is just left with a broken position. Yeah. So his IQP doesn't give him any privileges. There's no kings to attack. We're very active at the queen side. All of our pieces are standing beautifully. So black is just much worse. Instead of this, maybe it makes sense for black to play knight a6 here. And ultimately, I think that you're going to have to play f3. And you see, again, it's quite tricky. And I'm not like also 100% sure I fully understand all the nuances myself. But the way I see it, I think that this setup, black is going to play b5. But black is already committed to a5. So his best idea was to have the pawn on a6, put the knight on d7, and play c5. Right? And now it seems that black is like combining two ideas at the same time. So he plays a5, then he plays b5, and now he cannot play c5 because the pawn on b5 is going to be weakness. And you're still preparing this e4 push and go for this kingston attack. And ultimately, yeah, this is what the engine says the black should do, which is quite a humanly questionable idea, to be honest, because you just win a pawn on the spot. I don't think the people play like this. It's just an extra pawn, and black has to prove whatever he has, even though according to an engine, black is kind of all right. I don't know. But I don't think it makes sense. And I think that one of the main considerations for black could be that now that you are castle short, remember this knight h5? Now it makes sense. So he does it. We take on e7, and we want to play this f3, but the pawn on e3 is contested. So that's why we play queen d2, knight e7, we play rook e1, and this is where this game between Magnus Carlsen against Vladimir Kramnik was played. I already forgot the year, forgot the tournament. So you're going to have to check the Bootcamp PGN if you want. And I think that game continued with knight f8. I actually think that knight f6 is the best move. Black wants to play knight e4. And we talked about this briefly. Like knight c1, knight e4, here takes c5. Black is all right, not knight f6, but first c5. And also I thought that knight f4 becomes a very interesting opportunity. The point is, if he takes it, this creates some interesting position here because Black might have some problems to deal with this rook on e5, like bishop d7. He wants to play knight g4. We stop him. We build up some sort of an attack, like g4, pawn majority at the king side. I mean, Engine is holding this. Like, Black wants to play f6, but again, for a human, this could be quite difficult to handle because it's clear that you're the one who controls the initiative. Like here, bishop g6, Black can never take with e5, but according to Engine, White is only slightly better. I don't know. Like, it looks very interesting, to be honest, this setup. So you allowed him to take at f4, but this comes together with positioning the rook at e5. Otherwise, I think it makes no sense for you to go here. And if he doesn't do this, then yeah, you just take it, you play f3, which comes with two ideas. One idea is to play either e4, or the second idea is to go g4, h4, whatever. Yeah, let's say knight f6, you play like king h1, rook g1, etc. And I think it's quite clear that most likely Black will seek some counterplay with c5. This is usually how it happens, like c5 here, takes. It's a very classic position. So it's a bit dangerous. Things can go wrong for you, but there's also a lot of reward because if you open up the G file, there's going to be a very good attack chances for you. But finally, I landed in this position that probably the best attempt is to play bishop b1. And if Black commits to knight e4, we take with the knight, and we start to play at the queen side this position. Stopping knight g4, you have a bit better structure, your king is safe. According to Starfish, it's slightly better for White, but I think that one of the key ideas here is also you want to get the queens off the board, otherwise he's going to try to build up something at the king side, but apparently there's nothing real. And if you feel really threatened, I mean, you could always play like this. Yeah, so knight g1, so there's no sacrifice on h3, but I mean, there shouldn't be. And if Black does something else, again, you can use these common moves like h3. Again, knight f4 could be a thing, like this position, put the rook e5, whatever is this. It's very unclear. It's tough to evaluate it properly. Or according to an Engine, knight g3 suddenly becomes an opportunity. Play this position, some pressure at the f file, even though if you go deep enough, Black ultimately is fine again. And like, I hope you also understand me correctly. It's not like I'm presenting you some magical weapon that demolishes Black. You play the Queen's Gambit exchange, Queen's Gambit declined exchange variation, and you're going to demolish your opponents. No, of course not. I mean, if it was that easy, everybody would be playing the Queen's Gambit declined with this setup. But I think the plans are quite clear for you. And finally, he can play knight f8. This is quite an important idea. I think this is what Kramnik played. Magnus played knight c1. Very important maneuver for you to remember. You want to play f3 and then keep your opportunities open with either g4 or e4. Let's say here, f3. And if Black plays something like this, he wants to complete his development. I think that you should go for the break. And there's this lovely rearranging of the pieces. So you grab the center. I mean, your idea is to play e5, f4, establish a clear pawn majority at the king side. So he has to take it. This, again, we already know what this is. e5 and knight e4, knight e6 to follow. Black is in big trouble. His king side is quite weak. He can't do this. And if he goes here, he stops this. There's a very nice way to rearrange your pieces, like according to an engine at least. I mean, e5 is f6. It's a bit early, but h3, knight e1, and bishop c2. You're slowly rearranging your pieces, putting the knight on e3, looking for e5, looking for some queen d3, bat3. Like this could be a very nice thing. Knight e3, knight e2, and practically white has the better chances. So angel likes you, and you are still attacking the opponent's king. And that's why I think that as soon as you play f3 in this position, with the dark bishop's gone, I wouldn't really think about b5 here. It just looks a bit ridiculous. I think it makes sense when black has this bishop on e7. So I suppose he has to go here, c5. Organize some counterplay before e4 is too late. And now, again, most likely you have some choices, like you can just ignore this pawn, but taking makes sense, and you're just playing for some IQP. Bishop b1, there's some pressure, there's the d4 square. Again, if you can get the queens off the board, fantastic. Like, I would think about something like this. Maybe it makes sense. This, knight e4, king f2, g4, h4, g5. It makes it a very easy plan, yeah? So the pawn on e3 is easily defended, and you're still using this pawn majority at the king side. The rook goes to g1, and even with the queens off the board, you still have very good chances. So that's basically it. I think I also forgot, now I remember, to show you one idea where you should not mix up the plans. I think it was here. Let me try to remember. Where you cannot play rook b1. No, I mean, not cannot, but I think it was here. Wait, not here. It was this one moment. Yeah, here. Rook b1. Where was this? Here. With the knight on e2, the way I understand it, it quite doesn't make a lot of sense for you to play b4, b5. This is best executed with the knight on f3, because after a5, a3, black can suddenly play b5. And this is an idea that most likely is never going to work for black with the knight on f3, because you're about to play knight e5, f4, and have some Stonewall set up, London, whatever setup, and you have this king side attack and whatever black is doing at the queen side. But the big difference is that with the knight on e2, you have difficulties to do that. I mean, now f3, e4, black already basically played his ideal setup against this f3, e4. And if you go like this, black plays knight b6, he puts the knight on c4, and the big difference is that the dark bishops are on the board. So there's a lot of pressure against your queenside pawns. Knight c4 is going to apply pressure against pawn on a3, and you would love to have a knight e5 here, but you can't. That's basically the big difference. Yeah, so make sure you understand that knight e2 comes together with f3, e4. Knight e2 is necessary if black is committed to early h6. If black does not commit to early h6, he is not threatening with knight e4. You can play knight f3 and retreat with the darks with bishop f4. I think by now it already should be pretty clear. All right. We have to move on. And the next part I would like to talk about is what happens if black plays the bishop f5 idea. So let's go. d4, d5. Here. Knight c3, knight f6, c takes, e takes, and bishop g5. Now, black playing here bishop f5 is way too early. He can't do this because he hasn't solved the problems of the pawn on d5. We just take on f6. We play knight e5, and there's no tricks here. Yeah, so there's no bishop b4 check. You just retreat with the knight, healthy pawn. Okay, maybe engine is going to find here some tricks, but there's no compensation. Black can't do this. That's why black typically plays c6. He wants to play bishop f5 here. And now, bishop f5. You know, most of my analysis that I spent on the board, right? I had a laptop on this Millennium board, and I was shuffling the pieces. I tried to have a proper feeling how to prove an advantage. And I was doing a lot of analysis, and in the end, I realized it's very difficult to break. maybe it's impossible to break. And then I consulted with some specialists, and they said, yeah, I mean, basically at the pro level, this system is unbeatable, even though some people are still doing this. And the last example we have is the recent FIDE Candidates tournament, where Anish Giri tried to defeat Matthias Bluebaum, and he failed. Like, there was zero problems for Bluebaum whatsoever. And Giri is one of the best prepared opponents, players in the field, and he was unable to pose any problems whatsoever. So Black is doing really well. And that's why I would like to explain you where the current theory stands. So clearly, the first move is queen f3. We're attacking the bishop. We're attacking the knight. Black has to retreat. And we have to take it. Out f6, otherwise queen f3 makes no sense. And in case you're thinking, can I improve my odds about h4, h5, and then I'm going to take on f6, whatever. This is wishful thinking, but the point is, it does work. Black walks away, attacks a pawn on b2. You're not in time to take the pawn, the knight on f6, and long castle. There's this problem. You could go for some tricks with queen c8, but ultimately Black could just say, no, I'm just going to play chess here. I'm going to play knight e7, and what on earth are you doing here? Yeah, so this position makes no sense at all. h4 is nice idea, but it doesn't work. We have to take on f6. Otherwise, like I already said, your setup makes no sense. Now, g takes on f6 is going to be a mistake because of h4. I mean, it just makes no sense for Black to keep the queens on the board. Bishop d3, knight e2, you are controlling that f5 square. That's the big difference. Knight f4, huge advantage to it. I mean, Black gonna do this. He has to take with the queens as well. We take it, we take it. Okay, and this is where people have been at the highest level, mostly battling it out. There's a million ideas for White, and Black pretty much almost always plays the same. So one of the trends in this position now is to play h4. Black typically responds with h5. White plays knight h3, knight f4, g3. He kind of invites you to take. Black says no to that. There's this one game by Alexei Serrana, who is a very good theoretician and also practical player, against Martinez Alcantara. They played this year. King d2, b3, bishop d3. And here Serrana bluffed with rook g1, which I thought was a very nice practical idea. His idea was to play knight x on g6 and play g4. And Martinez blinked. Yeah, he took on d3, he played f5, and he got this terrible position. I mean, worst position, but horrible position. He managed to make a draw, but ultimately Serrano got everything he wanted from this game, right? So this g4 was kind of a bluff. Black could have played king h6. I think I also included this game in the Bootcamp PGN with very, very short analysis, if I'm not terribly mistaken. So, but ultimately Black is fine. This is one idea. The second idea that you could try to do, maybe after h4, h5, yeah? You could try to play rook d1 and bishop d3. Like this, bishop d3. Again, the big idea is that if Black decides to take it, there's this very important rook lift. Rook h3, protect the pawn, rook f3, knight f4, rook f4. It's becoming very clear that Black again is suffering for no good reason. Now the rook goes back. The knight is getting to f4, internal weakness. Rook is here, g3, and then you're going to open up the queen side and you're going to accomplish a lot of big things. All of this is really nice. But again, the point is Black is not really obliged to take on d3. He can play bishop d6. Of course, I mean, why would he trade it himself? And you can still carry out the same idea. Black is typically advancing at the queen side, and rook f3 no longer makes any sense. And this is where I pushed this line a bit. Like, ultimately, I thought that the only thing that makes sense to you is to go for the e4 push. So you do it. You play knight e4, king f1, knight c3. Like, try to open up the position a bit so that you can exploit those weaknesses. And yeah, this is basically how it goes. And literally the best you can do is this position, and black is still super solid. You have an outside pass pawn in the rook king game, but it's not enough to win the game. Like, I'm just showing you the ideas that you can use in your games, but it's still not enough. Let's go back to this position, and instead of rook d1, some people like to play long castle, and this, and this. Now the king is kind of protecting the queen side a bit, and most of the occasions black does take on d3. He plays rook g8, forces you to play g3, plays f5 and knight f6. And again, this position is literally impossible to break. So I think without the help of the rook, black has forced us to play g3, the pawn on h5 is defended. How do you make any progress here? Yeah, it's very, very difficult. And I think also the black king is going to go to like king h6. The bishop goes to d6. Yes, black is worse, but how do you make a progress? And that's why players from the white's perspective have been toying with the move orders. And in this position, also, king d2 has been played. King d2 here, bishop d3 here, b3, a5 here. You're toying with those ideas, h4, g4, whatever, but black plays knight c8 ultimately again. Like, he follows the principles of the Cosmic pawn structure. He puts the knight on d6. Prob is going to take on d3, push f5. What are you doing? Then there's also an idea to play knight f3, the old classical move. Knight f3, knight e7, and knight h4. I think this is what Magnus played in a famous game against Vladimir Kramnik. I think they played many famous games, to be honest. And this is what Magnus did with the white color. And the idea here was that if black plays bishop e7, Magnus went for knight e2. I think it was like this. Knight e2, f5. Wait, was it like this? No, it was not like this. No, I think it was it was knight b6. Yes, knight b6. Knight b6, knight e2, bishop e4 check, king d1. And the big idea was that... did I get it actually correctly? Knight a4 was b3. There was some quiet move where Magnus managed to put the knight on f5 and ignore the pawn on b2. So I'm going to maybe show you the game after this one before we move on to the next part. So it's quite important idea. But ultimately, like, black's, I think, best approach is to play bishop b4. And a3, we have, again, this position where white is a bit better. Like, this is some engine analysis I had. White is pushing a bit, but it kind of feels that black is safe. You can't really exploit those weaknesses at the queen side. And then I thought, what about rook c1, knight b6, a3? It kind of feels better, right? But again, black puts the knight on d6. And now what? Bishop e2, black is super solid. Black is not even pushing f5. The bishop on g6 is kind of okay. Your knight on h4 or f4, it stands great. But then what? You still need to make some pawn play to make a progress. And this is what many chess professionals they've been scratching their heads. I mean, how to make a progress here. And ultimately, what I believe, my recommendation is, do not play queen f3. I think that queen f3 is the main contention, but practice proves that black is holding the ground. And I'm recommending this new trend to play knight e2. We are not training the Lasco bishops, and the idea is to play knight g3. And also, I think there could be a very good chance that your opponent is going to be out of the book already, because, I mean, literally everyone plays queen f3, and knight e2 is like some new trend starting to appear, where, according to an engine, white doesn't really have an advantage, but there's at least an interesting game. Let's say black plays knight e7. We are simply going to transpose those positions. Knight g3, the big idea is if he plays here, we play h4, we want to play h5, and now we are getting to some positions that I'm about to show you. So we have still many pieces on the board. We kept the dogs with bishop. Okay, black has solved the problem of the last with bishop, but it's a rich game. Or if black plays bishop e6, we play bishop f4, walk away, we play h4, and again, we transpose. All right, let me show you now the main lines. Black probably is going to play h6. We put the bishop again on f4. The key idea here is that if black plays knight h5, looks super tempting. He wants to demolish your dogs with bishop, get the bishop pair. But the idea is that you play knight g3. And after knight takes on g3, h takes on g3, suddenly you have some very good, realistic chances for a kingside attack. Bishop d3, queen c2, takes, unknown castle. Why not? Double the rooks at the h-file. Maybe think about ideas like rook h5, rook h1, g5, or even sacrifice on h6. Looks very scary. And black is supposed to organize this counterattack at the queen side, but I really feel here it feels it's kind of slow. So that's why after knight g3, he has to take it. We take the bishop here. Again, it seems like it's not a big deal, but we have obstacle the bishops on the board. And there's a principle that when you have obstacle the bishops on the board, it feels like an extra piece in a direct attack. First, we play queen b3. Attack the pawn on b7. Provoke black to play queen b6. And we say no. We go back. And now the queen on b6 is kind of oddly positioned for black. It doesn't do anything. Let's say black goes here. I think he has to get rid of this knight. On h4, bishop d3, knight f3, and yeah, now where does he put the king? It's not very clear. Because short castle, we play h4, we want to play h5, we keep the king in the center for the time being, and I think that this position has a lot of potential. Again, we cast it alongside, and you see, because of the queen on b6, he's one tempo slower to start his counterattack with b5. This is why we included queen b3, queen c2. You understand it now. And g4 is about to happen. Let's say here, g4, knight h2. Everything is opening. f3, knight f1. Okay, I don't think I really need to show this so deep, but there's a lot of tactical resources here, and one can very easily organize a successful kingside attack. Yeah, this obstacle of bishop, it really helps in a direct attack. And I think the black did everything as he's supposed to, and still in this position, what has the better chances after h4? I mean, because you want to play h5 and you want to create so many Lascaux weaknesses in the position. I think it's a great practical weapon. And I could easily imagine many players playing knight h5 because it's a very common theme in the exchange variation. But let's say black plays something else. I thought, let's say bishop d6 looks logical. Bishop d6, it's kind of equal, like trade one bishop, we play knight g3, bishop g6, we trade the other bishop. But the thing is, now black has some weaknesses at the king side, meaning f5 is a weakness. Castles, knight e7. Okay, we are going to play f3. Like, it's maybe not a big deal, but e4 is coming. Maybe you can include rook d1 first. And according to Stockfish, what is slightly better? Like, it's not a dead equal position. And I think that also the principle here should be that if folks can play the four knights, two knights against two knights in the Italian game in a much drier position, why not here, where we have actually a different pawn structure? Yes, we can do that. I think it's a very clear plan for white. And instead of bishop d6, finally, I think the main consideration for black is to play knight e7. We play knight g3. And he has to make, again, a pretty big decision where to put the bishop here. Because if he plays bishop g6, we play bishop d3. We want to control this square. We want to attack the bishop on g6. This could be a target, by the way. He takes it. Now, the knight is getting to f5. g6. I suppose you have to play g6. Castles here f3. Same idea, again. I think it's very easy. Again, most likely, again, you have to include rook d1 to make sure there's no tricks in the center, protect the pawn, protect the queen, e4, e5, knight e4. Same plans. And if black retreats with the bishop on e6, he's threatening to play g5 to trap your bishop, to force you to play bishop e5. We have to respond with h4. We're dealing with this. Let's say black goes here. We play bishop d3. Again, we're controlling the f5 square. Bishop d6. He wants to trade off some pieces. And here, the best probably you can go knight e2. And you're already thinking about organizing something active for the king side. Let's say castles. You're not committed to show castle, by the way. f3. Why not? Yeah, f3. If he plays knight h5, takes, g4, rook g1, queen e2. This is, by the way, Engine's recommendation for black, but I think, again, it looks quite scary. f5 long castle. I mean, who is attacking who? I think it's white. Even though rook e1 here, f4, queen h2, knight c8, e4, rook e4. I pushed this line quite deep, actually, and white is better. g5 is happening somewhere. You have an IQP position, but the king is safe, which is something you cannot say about black. This is like one of the best lines that black can do in this position. And maybe after f3, like, he should follow the principle that you should meet f3 with c5 break. I mean, we talked about this a couple of times in this bootcamp. Let's say he plays c5. We take on d6 and we play g4. Anyway, the king feels pretty safe. C takes 94. I mean, he can give you one check maybe here. I didn't really check this, but I think, can I do this? Does this make sense? He can trade the queens. Fantastic position for you. Or if he plays something like knight c4, takes, queen g1, g5, you have the better knight, he has a useless Lascaux bishop. Again, I think it's looking pretty fantastic. And when I was looking at this, when creating the bootcamp, I thought, wow, it looks definitely so much more alive than this queen of 3 endgame, doesn't it? And that's why after knight g2, I think that your opponent will have to recognize that f3 might be a problem. And he has to play knight h5. Which is not so easy more because you're about to trade the ducks for bishops anyway, right? Why would he play knight h5 and then go back knight f6, which might facilitate your break anyway? It just makes no sense, but that's what Stockfish says. This knight h5. And you take it here. You're obviously going to go for the g4 push at some point. Queen c2. And let's say here, you can play long castle. The idea is knight f6, f3, knight f4, g4 is a fantastic position. So black would have to understand that at the long castle, rook e8, king b1, bishop d7, the position is kind of equal. I don't know, like, it still feels that your g4 is incoming pretty soon. But I actually liked rook g1 a bit more without f3. Just immediately play g4. Knight f6, f3. You want to play g4, h5. And here you have a choice to keep the king in the king side with knight f4, g3, some positional game. I don't know. I kind of don't like it. I think it makes more sense to cast the long side. Yeah. Bishop d7, knight f4 here, rook e1. Just play some positional chess like this. And g4 is always hanging in air at some point. Like, your opponent cannot be sure. I suppose he has to play c5 at some point. Yeah, like c5. And again, we take it, queen d2, IQP, weakness. Try to rearrange the pieces, trade the queens, and apply pressure. So that's it. And I think that it just looks better, this knight g2. And this is like the new trend right now among professionals to play this, to beat this bishop f5 and knight e2. And that's why I was a bit surprised that Anish didn't try this in the candidates tournament. But okay, who am I to question his opening prep? And I also would like to show you this game of Magnus, if I'm going to find it, of course. Let me see if I can find it. So this was the game that Magnus played in 2016 in Norway Chess, which, by the way, is about to start. As I'm recording this video, I think Norway Chess starts this Friday. I wish I could be part of the commentary team 1 year. So this is what Magnus played: is queen f3, takes, queen f6, knight f3, knight e7, knight h4. Here, yeah. So Kramnik played bishop e7, knight e2, and he played knight b6, which kind of makes sense. Magnus played here, check, king d1, and the big idea is that knight c4 is met with knight f5, which is a very big idea. And it looks very similar to what happened in the game. Like, white has a very nice pressure here. The bishop on g6 is useless, but Kramnik played knight a4. Magnus sacrificed the pawn, and the point is, this is a very important idea to remember. Knight a4 is king b3, obviously. Black is dropping something. He can't do this. And here white just develops a fantastic initiative. Takes, huge advantage to white. It's bad for black. And that's why here in this position, Kramnik played here, rook b1, activated the king, bishop d3, king e2, here, and Magnus got a big advantage. g4, he's about to play knight g2, knight f4, h4, h5. I think this game is super instructive. Here, takes, here, and the rest is history. Yeah, so Magnus won this game in a great fashion. So I'm not really gonna break down why Kramnik lost this game, and ultimately, if you're super deeply prepared from white's perspective and you know all the ideas, be my guest. You can try to crash through these defenses after g takes and f6, but the latest word is that at the pro level, everybody knows how to defend this. At least that's what I think. And if Anish Giri was unable to do it in the candidates tournament, then I don't think anybody can. So that's why I'm recommending this idea to play against bishop 5, knight e2. It's much more alive. You still keep your kings and attack chances as a possible, and maybe ultimately black somehow equalizes the game if you push it really deep enough. But since this is also a part of the element of surprise, I think it looks very promising. All right, now let's move on to the next part. Just a second, let me get ready. And it's going to be the delayed knight of6 setup. This setup starts with the same obviously moves. A black responds with e6, knight c3, and here instead of the traditional knight of6, black can also play bishop e7. I mean, he pretty much says that I'm going to put the knight on f6, but first committing to bishop e7, and you cannot get your typical Casped structures with the bishop on g5 without any other committal choices. So first and foremost, I think the question you might have is that since I am fighting for the center here with 2 pawns and the knight on c3, how about the e4 push? Because this is an idea in the so-called Slav triangle after c6. There's a bit different reasoning behind it, but e4 is one of the main continuations. And after d takes, knight e4, bishop b4, this is quite a big theory. But after bishop e7, now e4 is even less, because if you do this, black's going to take it, here play a knight f6. Yeah, now what? If you take on f6, black immediately targets your pawn on d4, which doesn't feel to be optimal. And after knight c3, black can immediately play c5, and if somebody can do worse, it's only white. That's why we cannot play e4 here. And I also thought, what about if we would try to transpose to the classical positions with bishop g5 and try to include knight f3? Black plays knight f6. Let's say we are playing c takes on d5, takes, and bishop g5. Same ideas all apply. I mean, bishop f5, probably black is going to experience some problems with these pawns on d5 and b7. But he just plays c6, and you see we are very early committing ourselves to the knight on f3. Instead, we should have had this position with the pawn on e3 and not the knight on f3. And if you still try to stop black's bishop f5 with queen c2, black simply plays g6 with bishop f5 to follow, and no problems for black whatsoever. And this is the reason why we have to choose something else. I mean, we can still play c takes on d5, e takes on d5, and instead of bishop g5, now we can play bishop f4, which is pretty much the next best thing. And you should already remember that we did retreat to f4 before, but here we basically have no choice. And I think actually I forgot to show you some lines. Why don't we play a bishop f4 immediately? I'll try to remember what was the problem here. After knight f6, c takes, e takes, and bishop f4. I think I forgot to mention this in the intro. The point is that black is committed neither to c6 or bishop e7, and he can immediately try to play something very aggressive like bishop b4 or c5 and knight c6 to follow. That's basically the reason. So if we play bishop g5, play e3, black plays h6, we go back to f4, we kind of lose a tempo, but black at the same time is also committed to c6 and bishop e7. So for him, going for these Tarrasch-like positions no longer makes any sense. So bishop e7 takes, bishop f4. Here black pretty much has to make the first choice. He could continue with knight f6, show castle, complete development. Or he can try to play c6. And if this happens, black wants to do one of the two things. The first thing might be he might want to solve the problem of this last bishop, put it on f5, and then complete development, because like this idea for black to put the bishop on f5 is a recurring theme throughout the exchange variation. What the second idea that he might want to do is lose a tempo, play bishop d6, continue with knight e7, and maybe trade the bishops like this. So it kind of makes sense. We play e3, and here black has this first choice. So let's say he plays bishop d3, bishop d6. We have to take it, takes. Black wants to play bishop f5. We are about to stop it. We play bishop d3, knight e7, and queen c2. So we do the best we can to stop this from happening. And also at the same time, black obviously cannot castle short because the pawn on h7 will be under attack. And here black has to make some sort of a choice. I mean, there is quite a popular idea for black. Try to play at a queen side with b6 and bishop a6, which I think it's more like a common idea in some London variations where this bishop on d3 is such an important piece that black tries to trade it on a6. But the thing is, black is at the same time committing to the weakness on c6. So by definition, you pretty much always get a slightly better position. Just play normal chess. I think there's no reason for you to put knight on e2. Just play knight f3. Here, castles, takes. And with its current pawn structure, it pretty much signals that black most likely will have to play c5 at some point. I mean, the rule of this pawn is that it can never go back, obviously. Let's say castles, rook c1 is a very easy move. Here, I thought that something like rook c2 makes a lot of sense. Double the rooks here, try to apply some pressure, see what happens. And if black tries to play something like c5 with too early, of course we take it. And this is a territory of the hanging pawns. And that's the kind of bootcamp I have not yet made a topic about, but probably I will in the next coming editions or so. I just have to find the time to do it. After b takes on c5, black establishes these pawns, which might be strong, but to be honest, I feel they're easy targets. Rook d1, knight f6, and very common for the hanging pawn structure. e4 is very effective. Not only you're threatening to win a pawn, but also play e5, and black's position, to be honest, is pretty terrible. Instead, he could try to play something like this: rook c8, rook c1, a5, stopping some queen a6 ideas. And here the key is not to rush, because black is pretty much tied to defend this pawn on c6, and instead you can make some small improvements, like you make a window for the king. h3 is a good move in general. It's a g6, a3. Kind of think about some b4 ideas, but pretty much just to make sure that the pawn on e2 never is under attack. And at some point, maybe here, maybe a bit later, look for the e4 break. And also the e4 break is very common for the Caspit pawn structure. Knight x on e4, even though we give away the d5 square, this is a weakness. Here, rook e2, maybe you can try to apply some pressure to the king side. At the right moment, knight e5 could be a thing. And what is slightly better? Like, it's not really anything super critical or groundbreaking, but it just feels that black is having some weaknesses and his pieces are positioned pretty oddly. This happens after b6, and if instead he tries to complete some normal development like this, knight e7 here, yeah, this is the trick. To be honest, I think that there's nothing terribly wrong for you to also play knight f3, but again, at the same time, black wants to play knight f6, g6, and bishop f5. And you could, of course, still castle short, play h3, rook b1, b4, b5, and maybe claim some pressure. But here, I think it's a good idea, since it kind of feels it's pretty apparent that black wants to trade those last with bishops on f5. You get ready for that. That's why I think knight e2 is the best here, and play f3. Again, the same idea. And if he plays g6, you'll be always ready to play e4. And of course, you can always toy with the move orders. But I think here f3 makes a lot of sense. Castles, g4, not only you are threatening with some kingside attack, but you take away the f5 square for black's bishop. I suppose black has to seek some counterplay here. And now the game gets a bit sharper. Maybe in some lines there's some knight b5 idea. To be honest, I didn't really check it so deeply, but I thought that at least you get this position where you put the knight on d4 and either reinforce it with the other knight, something like knight e2, and attempt to get a better endgame, or play a long castle. The point, obviously, again, is you're threatening with g5, and black would get in trouble very quickly. Like, takes. He obviously cannot take it because of bishop h7. And here, queen f4 check is threatening, and I don't know, maybe something like king b1 makes sense, and h4, g5. Even though we have a symmetrical pawn structure on the board, it feels that white is calling the shots. This happens after knight e7, and let's of course check what happens if black plays the most straightforward continuation g6, and we play again f3. Yeah, I think that there's no need for you to allow this bishop f5 to happen, and we get more or less the same. Knight e7, knight e2, castles. As soon as he castles, you can already instigate some sort of a kingside attack with h4. The pawn on e3 can be easily defended, and long castle. Again, same principle, you know? And when I was creating the source file for the bootcamp, this is what I noticed very often, that once black's docks with bishop is gone, then your long castle opportunities start to look really real. Let's say here, queen e2, b5, and here we can borrow an idea from the Sicilian dragon. This g4 is a very common idea. Maybe you can improve the idea, but basically here's that you open things at the king side very quickly, and black is in trouble, right? All right. So about c6, e3. Yeah, bishop d6. This was one continuation. The second idea for black is to play a bishop f5, which maybe is a bit more popular for black. And here the main continuation in this position by far is g4. This is like the old continuation, which is very good. And the point is, black cannot automatically respond with bishop g6. It's kind of dubious, because you play h4, you want to play h5, and like I think that black is here risking to lose a lot of tempi, like without any deep analysis, something like this. I would think about h5 here, bishop d3, knight e2, knight g3, knight f5. It looks very promising, and obviously you're castling the long side and this f5 square. I think it's very, very important for you to conduct some kingside attack. And here, obviously, the question is what happens if black takes, and this is borderline losing. This trick should be known. You play queen b3, the pawn cannot be defended properly, and if black plays b6, the simplest continuation here is to take on h4 and knight e5. That's it. Black is cooked. Immediately, you have a terrific attack. C takes on d5. Of course, it's queen takes on d5. Queen a8 is incoming, bishop b5. Maybe there's a checkmate on the board. So black is just lost. He can't do this. And if he doesn't take it, knight c7 is incoming. That's it. Yeah. So this is a very nice trick. And for this very reason, bishop g6 is not a very good continuation. He has to play bishop e6, which is a more modest move. Now you have a choice, basically, here. Like, you can play the cautious move h3. And this is also sometimes how some good players play the Sicilian, against the Sicilian knight, or for Sveshnikov. First they play g4, grab space, the opponent immediately retracts his pieces, and then you play h3 to secure your conquered space advantage. I think the reasoning looks pretty much similar here. We play bishop d3, we're thinking about some aggressive development of the king side, but I mean, it just goes to like something sharp like this, where black can temporarily sacrifice a pawn, he rejects it, he goes after it, and whatever is this. By the way, this is one of those rare moments when you are castling the long side where black has still both bishops on the board. Of course, b5, b4 is incoming, but now his own king is kind of exposed, he cannot castle the short side. I mean, engine says it's slightly better for white, but I wouldn't really read into this, and I would say that the position is just unclear, to be honest. And I'm not entirely sure that this is the best you can do. And the other continuation here for white is to be very aggressive, play h4. And again, black cannot play bishop takes on h4 because of, I think it was actually, I forgot to check it. h4, bishop h4, there was the same trick. Queen b3, b6, and whatever. Maybe it was even positionally knight f3, knight e5, but this position was very dangerous for black. And if black plays the best move, knight e7, it goes like this. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure I understand this position, because I have a feeling that those pawns at the king side might be overstretched at some point, so you gain some space but give away the g5 square. The black king is going to feel safe. I don't know if I would want to play this, but I mean, Stockfish says it's better for white. So what do I know? But there's another continuation instead of g4, which is, and you're going to recognize the maneuver, and this is why I really like it. It's pretty much the same response. Should black play bishop f5, what we discussed in one of the previous parts? It's knight e2 again. And that's the same new trend, and it looks pretty much the same, all the same ideas. We want to play knight g3, bishop d3, knight g3, maybe h4. And here actually knight f6 is quite risky for black. Can you imagine this? Like, this really is not a very good move, because we play knight g3, and bishop e6, I suppose you just play bishop d3 and you have your fantastic position, control the f5 square. I suppose he goes here. Now you play h4. And the problem for black is that h6 is met with h5 and bishop d3. We already know this idea. We trade the bishops and we conquer the knight's outpost on f5, which we can strengthen with g4, f3. Yeah, like castle alongside and have your kings at attack with ease. So that's why after h4, black probably has to play h5. And we still play bishop d3. Same idea. Takes, takes. Now there's a difference that he probably can better cover the weakness on the 5 with g6, but you still play a long castle, knight e7, and here instead of the slower move f3, sometimes you might have an opportunity to go for the immediate break in the center with e4. Now here actually engine says that black cannot take on e4. And if he cannot take on e4, you're playing e5, you have the pawn majority, the king side, and you're calling the shots. And it's not so obvious for black. It's very easy to miss this, because check this out. So takes, 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 knight f6 looks very, very illogical. Black is about to castle short, secure an outpost on d5, except this is losing. Takes, here, and here comes the shocker. Boom. That's it. Black is toast immediately. If he plays bishop e7 here, and there's no defense, you're about to exploit the pin. King of 8 is rook e7, bishop d6, goodbye. Black is done. And instead, if he tries to play a queen d5, check here, bishop e5, no defense. Again, this IQP doesn't matter. The king is in the center, it's in danger. So my advice to you would be that don't be super focused on the f3 e4 idea, but sometimes ask yourself, can I go for the e4 break right now? Okay, I am creating a weakness on the e4, but there's an exception to the rule, which is when you have a direct attack, the positional benefits or weaknesses don't matter. Like when you have a direct attack or initiative, nothing matters, basically. That's always above everything else, like weaknesses or some outposts, whatever. Nobody cares. When there's a direct attack, different rules apply. And that's the bottom line, is that knight of 6 is quite dangerous for black, and I'm pretty sure that so many people they're going to fall into this when they play against you. And he has to play very carefully. Knight e7. I mean, knight g3 is good. Like, you can do that. Knight g3, bishop e2. Black, I suppose, has to finally develop the king side. We play h4, h5. The difference is that now bishop d3 would be losing a tempo, which is not ideal. But, I mean, we can still play some positional chess like this and try to get the knight to f4 for some interesting pressure. Now we want to win a pawn on h5. Again, Stockfish kind of likes white's position. But I thought that after knight e7, it's a bit more interesting and fun to play h4. A bit more energetic chess. And you're basically, again, laying some traps because it's quite risky for black to take this pawn. Bishop takes on h4. We play queen b3, attack the pawn. And b6, by the way, is met with the same plan, except we change a bit the move order. We sack the knight. We sack the rook. I will play queen d5. You see, black's rook at a8 is under attack, the bishop at a5 is under attack, and we get to this position where we have sacrificed an exchange for a pawn, but our bishops, the very strong center, they easily compensate it, and black is actually somewhere borderline having a losing position here. Like, it doesn't look like it, but it is. Let's say knight c3, knight g6, we could even afford to trade the queens, and those bishops are so monstrous that black cannot deal with them. Like knight e5, bishop a6 is threatening. Takes, rook c1. He doesn't even feel that we're down the material. d5, d6, goodbye. Again, black is done. Yeah, I think it's very easy, even for a very good player, to fall into this from the black's perspective. b6 looks quite natural. The more natural move, perhaps, is knight b6. But now we play a4. And again, black is losing some time because a5, of course, it's a very big mistake. Takes, queen b6. 2 minor pieces for the rook should be easy victory. And yeah, if black has to commit something really sad as bishop c8 to defend a pawn on b7, something is terribly wrong with his position. And yeah, I've wrote down here a5. There's some very nice lines like knight c4, e4, break in the center. I have no clue what black's supposed to do, like bishop g5, takes, rook h5. There could be more than one good move here in this position, but it goes to like this. You get 2 minor pieces for the rook, you're easily winning. Or instead, if he tries to retreat with bishop on e7, takes, knight b5, there's a fork threat. Takes, you win back the pawn, you keep the initiative. So, like, it's very, very dangerous for black to play this. And knight e7, I mean, his position, again, is so underdeveloped that some sort of a break or e4 is feeling very natural. So I didn't really deeply analyze this. So the purpose of this podcast was not to deliver you forced files where you're completely winning against black who plays this setup, but so that you know that it's a fantastic setup for white. Let's go back a bit. Yeah, black accepting this pawn on h4 is really dangerous. And instead he has to complete development. I suppose it's knight f6. And again, we play knight g3. Same idea. And here the difference is that he cannot play bishop g6, clearly, because it's asking for trouble. You're going to play h5. And after bishop e6, you play bishop d3. Same plans. It's a very good coordination you have there at the king side. And what I really like about this position, it kind of feels similar to the ideas of the first part where we talked about. Yeah, this knight g2, knight g3, much more alive than a couple of those early g4 lines. You get the knight on a5, he has to trade it. I'll look for some g4. Again, we don't castle short. You could, of course, but with the pawn on h4, I think it makes sense to organize some Kingston attack. Black would seek some counterattack with knight e4. The king of f1 feels pretty safe. And I don't know how forced is this, but it feels really good. Yeah, this is one of the lines I looked at where suddenly you start to play positionally, you keep your kings and attack chances alive, and black is suffering everywhere. Yeah, so of course you can always replay these lines a bit slower. I know that I'm showing them pretty quick, otherwise this would be 5-hour boot camp, but you should like develop a pretty good feeling which pieces where to position. And the other continuation after bishop f4, so we looked at c6, e3, there's the two major continuations. There could be some other ones, but then I think your approach is very easy. Like he plays something like knight f6, you play bishop d3, knight f3. I think, again, everything is going to be literally the same, except black didn't include h6. So I don't think we have to talk about this. But there is this idea for black to play knight f6. And if black does this, I think it gives a very strong signal that he is looking into the direction of c5, because he is not playing c6 and he wants to somehow organize some counterplay in the center. Well, our approach remains the same. We play e3. I think that black has to castle short. I mean, I did look at bishop f5. What if black tries to be really smart? And in case you're wondering, can we? Yes, you can. You can play knight e2, and maybe you should, because it's the same approach again. Knight g3, bishop g6 is h4 again, and bishop e6, we get to something like this. You don't have to take. C takes, knight c6, rook e1, easy kingston attack, really well positioned pieces. Even though we have a symmetrical pawn structure on the board, I just think white's game is super nice. But to be honest, I mean, bishop f5 is kind of dubious, because you can immediately play queen b3, which is like the main rule for black, why he normally should include c6 before playing bishop f5. He has problems with his pawn. With the pawn on c6, he would have queen b6. Now he does not. And Engine says there's some knight c6 ridiculousness. The point is, queen b7, black plays knight b4, and there's some counterplay. But this is where you switch on Stockfish, and you know what Stockfish says? Boom, g4. Yeah, we have some grab ideas here. The idea of this move is to push back black's last square bishop, gain some time, and if he takes it, we take it, knight b4, and now we can afford to play rook c1. We're gaining a critical tempo. So bishop f5 is already too slow, and if he goes here, we collect the second pawn. Black has zero compensation for the pawn. If he takes after g4 with the knight, we take on d5. And there have been some games where black, I suppose, has to keep the queens on the board, but he is losing the center. There's a very inspired game here. I don't know, to be honest, how to validate this. Can I say that the position is a mess? It's hard to say, but you do control the center. You have some prospect for a kingston attack. Angel likes white's position, so probably white is better. It's hard to say. And also, queen d5, knight e5, it just gives you the better prospects, because knight c2 check is king e2, you're safe, and after c6, you're getting this position, where again, white is slightly better because of the center. So I don't really know if this is relevant to you. I just wanted to show you this line so that like this g4 maneuver imprints in your memory, but ultimately maybe you don't need that, and you could just play knight g2 e2. And I think that typically black's going to play show castle. Well, we are going to play bishop d3. I actually thought that in this position, there's also a possibility to play knight of 3, which is pretty interesting. Because if black plays bishop f5, we can start some g4 stuff. Knight e7, g4, here knight h4. I was not entirely sure what is this. I didn't really care about the engine's evaluation. I don't remember what it said. Maybe it was about equal, but I thought that you might have opportunity to castle the long side. Also, some take on g6, queen f3, long castle ideas. Could it be something? And if he plays, again, knight h5, tries to eliminate your dogs by bishop, you already know this maneuver, h3, bishop h2, and proceed with your typical plans. Looks really good. So he can't eliminate your bishop at e5 easily without consequences. So I think that these lines are quite similar. And yeah, but anyway, let's stick to bishop d3. And if black plays c6, we probably can play h3 or knight f3, knight f3, knight h5, bishop e5. I think, again, these lines are really similar. Like h3 here, knight f3 looks fantastic setup for black, for white. And bishop d6, again, we have no castle short. We can put the knight on e2, knight f4, g4, queen f3, go for some g5 ideas. I think we already looked at this setup a couple of times. Think about the long castle. And finally, black has to try to play the c5. Here the thing is, I don't think you have to rush with d-takes on c5. Probably you can do that. But if you do, black's going to take it and eventually prepare the d4 push. That's why here we have to continue development. And the big question is it knight f3 or is it knight e2 here? And I think that knight g to e2 is more flexible. Because if you put the knight on f3, black might have the idea to play c4 and knight c6. He's playing at the pawn majority at the queen side, and your knight on f3 is not as flexible as the knight on e2 could be. Let me show you. So I like this move more. Let's say black goes here, show castle, and for example, let's say in this position, black plays c4. That's what he does. We retreat. I suppose he plays a6. We play b3, try to rip apart his queen side. I think that, again, here the principle is that we understand that black has 3 pawn islands. We have 2 pawn islands, and it's just an easy game for us. Bishop g5, knight f4. That's why the knight on f3 doesn't stand as good as e2, because we can immediately apply some pressure against the black's pawn on d5. If black holds on to this pawn, we take it. And here, this is just really bad for black. You play d5 and d6. The line actually continues. I don't think I have to show you this, but black is in trouble. He's just losing material. With very accurate play, he's borderline not lost. So I don't think it's very good. And instead, he has to play b-takes on c4, and now you have your easy game. Again, maybe something like h3 to secure an escape route for your Doxwa bishop. Here. Again, knight f4 could be happening. And no matter how you look, black is always a little worse. You have very nice blockade on c3. Black c4 is going nowhere. You have very active pieces. There's no rook b8, by the way. And what is better? That's why c4 is not something you should be really concerned about. And instead, black probably has to take it. And here the key idea for you is to include a knight trade. Sometimes people forget it. They automatically play e-takes on d4, and then the knight on e2 is quite poorly placed. We take with the knight. Black has to take it. E-takes on d4. You know what? One thing I'm going to tell you about this position. When I grew up, I was a strong believer of the approach that IQP, or isolated pawn, is the best thing in the world. That's why I will never ever allow my opponent to fix it. But I grew older and hopefully wiser, and I understood that this is very narrow thinking, that you shouldn't be fixed so much on the isolated pawn or the supposed outpost, but you should look at the health of your position together. Because here, if he does this, he does eliminate our outpost, but now the remaining pieces are really standing well. And black is still having some real problems with this Lascaux bishop. He doesn't know where to place it. Let's say here, h3, rook e1, queen b3, and we still have some pressure. And to be honest, it feels like some what do you call it? Exchange Slav variations sometimes, where we have these pawns on e3 and e6, and maybe the same plans apply. You can play at a queen side, you can play at a king side. Your minor pieces are standing slightly better, black is slightly worse. It's kind of not a big deal, but still it's a very pleasant pressure. Now, instead of this, the main move for black is to play bishop g4. He wants to force us to do something. We take on c5, we take on c5, we play h3. And you're watching this, you're wondering, where have I seen this before? Yes, you have seen it before. This recently happened in the FIDE Candidates tournament, where Anish Giri played against Javohir Sindarov. I think this was the penultimate round, if I'm not terribly mistaken, where Giri needed the victory with white. And black has to take on e2. He has no choice. Because if he plays bishop h5, this trick is important to remember. You're winning a pawn on d5 by force. g4, g5. Thank you for the pawn. Black has no compensation. That's why he has to take on e2. We take on e2. And since you have two bishops, black's d5 pawn is a weakness. Black is trying to liquidate. And in that game, I think that Anish immediately played e4. And I'm not going to really compete with the prep of super GMs. I'm pretty sure that both of them, they knew what they were doing. But, I mean, anyway, I switch on Stockfish, and Stockfish says rook c1 is the right move, and Anish didn't play it for whatever reason. I'm pretty sure he had much, much deeper analysis than my silly analysis. But the point is, we're forcing black's bishop to retreat a bit further. Bishop b6. Now we play e4. And let's say if black would continue in the same manner as Sindarov, rook e8, here we don't play knight g3, which probably is also good. Like this, it's some tactical mess on the board. But I actually thought that easier move is f3. We're weakening this long diagonal for the black bishop, but I don't see how black can exploit it. Let's say knight b4, king h1, and we are about to establish a beautiful blockade on d3. We stop black's knight c5 to b4. Here, takes, bishop h2. Think about knight f4, knight e5. I don't know, like, I just think it looks really nice. Maybe in some lines, if the knight's not getting to d5, you can put it on d3, play the pawn majority at the king side, and you're basically playing against black's bad ducks by bishop. Maybe it's not a lot, but it's something. And I thought it's giving you some ideas. So ultimately, like, this setup for black, some people like to play this. There's been some suffering. Black is trying to equalize, but pretty much all of your ideas of the exchange variation are working also here. All right, and we have one more final part. The other setups for black. And there's a couple of them, not so many of them, but still I would like to show you them. e6, knight c3, knight f6, c takes, bishop g5. And in this position, this is what we talked at the very beginning. Let's say black goes here, here. Let's say he goes, let me try to remember. Here. There is a chance that he might transpose to some c5 setup. Again, with the knight on f3. He could try to do that. And it looks kind of similar to what we looked at. But there's some differences. Again, I'm not entirely sure if this is something we should look really seriously. But the trick here is that after d4, knight a4, black has some problems with his pawn. He cannot do it like this. And after bishop b5, rook c1, I think he ends up losing this pawn. Even though, you know, the engine keeps pushing this like some knight g4, takes, checkmate threat, knight f3, takes, bishop b5. I don't think this is so important here, but I just thought that your approach is kind of similar. Except I try to remember, did I really have a... Because I thought this should have been in the previous chapter. Why is it in this one? Maybe I forgot to include it. Here, rook e8, knight f3. It's not the most popular move order for black. Yeah, we are committing to knight f3. Like, there could be many move orders. And, yeah, knight c6, d takes, and he has to go here, here. The knight is heading to the d4 square. Queen b6, knight e4, knight c3, and we have our IQP position. So I think that for you, it would be a very good idea that you would watch some of my older boot camps about the IQP. I thought about it from the IQP's perspective, how to play against an IQP, and I think some of the common ideas probably they're gonna apply here. I tried to remember what was the other move here. Yeah, so bishop e7 here, h6, something I wanted to show you. Ah, he could try to play like this. h6, bishop f4. Yeah, so if we play bishop h4, now we have to play knight g2, most likely. If you can still keep up with what I'm saying, because if you play bishop d3, knight f3, remember black's going to go for the c6, knight e4 idea eventually. There was this one standalone idea that after bishop f4, black could try to play bishop f5 again. And after queen b3, he could try to play knight f6. Now that I'm looking at this, was this not the line we looked at with g4? Actually, it looks kind of familiar. You see, I'm also a bit confused with move orders. Yeah, g4 is a move, but apparently black can play... Ah, wait, no, I think we had a bit different position. g4, black has the move bishop h7 here. Yeah, this was some other standalone continuation. And again, the point is, like, this ends with a draw. Black has some very accurate knight e8, rook b8, rook a8. It's perpetual attack to the queen. You can't play this. I mean, unless you want to draw, of course. And if you play rook c1, black can try to get to like classical Carlsbad structure, but the knight on a5 is weird. He solved the problem of the light square bishop, but what is the knight doing with a5? Like, there are these sidelines. Maybe you don't need to do this. Like, I don't know what are the odds that black is gonna know this bishop f5 line, that avoiding c6, including h6, playing bishop e7, now play bishop f5, and he knows that there's knight c6. Yeah, but to be honest, yeah, maybe it's just simpler for you to play bishop h4, you avoid all of this. But there is this one extra line I wanted to show you. This is quite a trendy continuation, a bit standalone idea. Sometimes black tries to do this, bishop g4, which the move order can vary a bit. He tries to solve the problem of the light square bishop, which also, by the way, is a very common theme for the exchange Caro-Kann, because the Carlsbad, exchange Caro-Kann, in terms of the structures, they're quite similar. And there's a catch, that in this position, this obvious move is not the best. Black goes here. You can't take the pawn on b7. It's very risky. Your king is exposed. Bishop b4 is incoming. I wouldn't really recommend this. So if you go here, black castles, and now your queen on b3 stands weird, because black's going to play c5. You can't win the pawn on b7, you can't win the pawn on d5, and this is what Stockfish says that you should do, but I don't like it, to be honest. Like, it feels your king is exposed, there's no development here, your queen is God knows where, so I think it's just very risky. And that's why instead of this, after bishop g4, there's this very important move, queen c2. And you just play your chess. Let's say if he plays knight e7, h3, this already is a mistake. You play bishop d3 and you play g4, you're winning a pawn. Yeah, he can't do this. I think this maneuver is also something that you should remember. If he plays, again, the same stuff, c6, h3, and bishop d3, you want to play g4, he's in trouble. He can't do this. And that's why black has to play castles. h3, a bishop h5, and now for some reason, yeah, this bishop d3 didn't work. Let me try to remember why. It looks pretty much the same, but it's not the same. So bishop d3, yeah, black plays c5. You can do this, but black gains a lot of time. And you don't have the time to play g4 anymore. That's actually quite a big difference, because black is not committed to c6. But now there's a trick. We take it and play queen f5. Quite an unusual idea. But we're winning a pawn. And black is playing for some compensation. And I pushed this line quite far. And I came up with the conclusion that accepting the second pawn is simply necessary. You have to do this. There's nothing better. Knight e7, black definitely has some compensation. But with a cold-blooded defense, you give up the pawn, you go for development. It just goes to like this position. And literally the best that black can do is try to survive in this position down a pawn where he has a lot of activity. But last time I checked, a pawn is a pawn. Yeah, so maybe you can replay this line a bit slower. This happens after bishop g4 in this line. Black doesn't play c6, he plays bishop g4. And this queen c2, bishop d3, h3 is a very important idea. But again, you have to expect black's c5 idea. So this is one of the sidelines, one of the other setups I thought that you should know. And what was else here? I think it was castles, bishop d3. I have a feeling I forgot something. All right. And the other continuation for black is to play c6, e3. And he can try again to get the same idea of bishop g4 with bishop e7 and bishop g4. His idea is to play bishop h5, bishop g6. And now queen c2 is not as effective, because he's going to play bishop h5, bishop g6. I think that this part is kind of logical. And you can play queen goes here, queen b6, and use the same idea again. Do you remember? Provoke the black queen to b6 and go back. Because the queen on b6 doesn't stand where it's supposed to be. Should castle, you're winning the pawn on h7 by taking on f6. And there's an extra idea that you should know, that now bishop h5, you can meet with a4. And black has some practical issues. Bishop g6 is a 5. He can lose a piece, just like that. Like something like this, 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 and this. Yeah, just down a piece for nothing. g4 is incoming. And if he plays here, we play a3, stop knight b4, knight f3, knight e5 is incoming. To be honest, I think the black has no choice here. He has to take it and seek some counterplay, and it just leads to some kind of a mess. Whatever is this? Long castle, c takes, rook c8, rook g1, and it's a race. Probably you're going to hide a king someplace. It looks a bit scary, but also your initiative looks very promising. You're thinking about some queen g2 lifts or double the rooks. The pawn on g7 actually is very weak. So this is not for the faint-hearted to play this position. But I mean, there's probably also the simpler move. You can play knight e2. Should be pretty good. And black is wasting a lot of moves for this maneuver to happen. So you're like, okay, fine. You do it. So here, bishop g6. So bishop g4, bishop h5, bishop g6. He spent 3 tempi to trade the bishops. Okay, fine. Knight f4 takes. You get the knight on d3, knight e7. And probably, again, you're going to think about some f3, e4 ideas or whatever. Or maybe b4, b5 ideas. So black seemingly has solved the problem of this bishop, but you kind of still keep some pressure. There's also this idea for black to play bishop d6, bishop d3, and in some blitz games, sometimes people play bishop e6. I think I saw Hikaru Nakamura play this a couple of times. They're trying to play something like knight e7, queen e7. But what you should remember, that black committing to this move early is a big mistake. Why? You play a 4. And this sometimes is an opportunity for you. I think this maneuver we can borrow from the London, because it kind of feels like the London setup, bishop g5, d4, e3, bishop g5 f4, knight f3, knight e5. And yeah, this, once again, it looks very, very risky for black. I mean, bishop f3 opens up the g file. Does black want to do that? If not, the knight is here, g4 to follow. I think he's just gone immediately. And that's why after f4, he probably has to play some counterplay with c5, but I think he's just dropping the pawn on d5. Like here, here, f5, and knight e5. No compensation for black at all. So this bishop e6 is a very inaccurate move order. It has probably no standalone value. I think it's a good idea that you remember that you can play this f4 sometimes before playing knight f3, and probably you can do this when the e file is closed. Like there's bishop e7, bishop e6, sometimes f4 becomes possibility. But normally black probably castles. Now, of course, f4 makes no sense. Yeah, black just plays rook e8, queen e7, the opponent needs a weakness. Why would you do that? You're not in time to play knight f3, knight e5. You can play knight e2 here, but here you have to be a bit careful, because after rook e8, make sure you're not falling for the Greek gift. So castle, bishop h2, and knight g4, which is one of the reasons why black is going for this setup. You see the bishop on g5 is falling, and your position is just terrible. But I mean, you can still go here if you play h3, and you play show castle, bishop h4, queen d2, and you have your typical position, typical plans, queen c2, knight e2, knight f4, etc. Your king feels really secure here. But probably, I think you should play f4, knight f3. Knight f3, and now there's this line, h6, bishop h4, let's say he plays bishop e6, he tries to complete development with knight e7, have a very solid presence in the center, and this is again where you have this very annoying queen b3. So how is he meeting it? Because if the queen leaves, you are taking on f6, you're just ruining his pawn structure. And after b6, that's already a big accomplishment to you. You play castles, you play rook c1, and that's a target. Forget about b4, b5. You don't need it. Black already has made a weakness on c6. And yeah, maybe just retract the bishop someplace, put the rook on d1, play h3, and maybe bishop g3 actually here. Feels safer. Trade off his Dr. bishop to eliminate his kings and attack ideas, and the weakness on c6 is always there. If he plays this, castles and let's say bishop g4 looks very logical. Now, there's this idea that you can allow him to take on f3, meaning you play queen b3, and if he decides to ruin your pawn structure and play queen c8, he defends it, he wants to play queen h3, try with the checkmate, whatever. This is looking pretty good. Bishop h4 and bishop g3. Very, very nice position to you. And again, you have a chance to go for the e4 break in the center just because you have the pawn on f3. Takes, 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 king g2, rook h1, rook d1, whatever. So you control the center. You're slightly better. And if he plays knight a6, the best continuation. Now there's some tricks, actually. The point is, you can't take this pawn. Knight b4 hits your bishop on d3. He's trapping your queen. So make sure you're not falling for this. But you play knight e2, and your idea is to play rook e1 and go for some break in the center. That's the big idea against this bishop d6. Very, very effective. But the thing is, after bishop h5, Engine is not afraid of the Greek gift right now. Because after rook e1, apparently this is a very big mistake. Takes, check, King G1 here because of the knight on a6. So make sure you understand this, that you don't mix up the lines, because queen h4 is just knight f3. You attack the queen, you protect the pawn, not the pawn, but square on h2, the knight on the a6 is lost, and black's position falls apart. He can't do this, but yeah, you have to be a bit careful. If he plays this, now you can use the same idea of f4 again. f4, knight f3, knight e5, and the spin that black has, it looks kind of unpleasant. Bishop e7 here, you try to trap his bishop. Takes, knight f3, knight e5. Great outpost. Black cannot do this. And maybe he has to trade the bishops here. Takes. And this is also one of those moments where you can go for the e4 break in the center. And again, this doesn't work. So it doesn't work. Check here, queen g5. Here, the difference is you play knight f3, and he simply drops the knight. Because queen h5 is rook h1, he's also dropping the queen. He can't do this. And after e4, d takes on e4, knight e4, there's some pressure. And to be honest, what amazes me is Engine's optimism, that after even this amazing shot, rook e8, queen b4, what is up 2 pawns, but Engine says it's somehow close to equal. Maybe, I'm not going to really argue. I feel that one of the pawns is definitely going to fall, but I mean, last time I checked, 2 pawns are 2 pawns, right? And there's also this line that instead of bishop g6, Engine likes e4, and it gets really messy here. e4, b5, bishop b1, take on e4, and whatever, this position. So those are the main setups that I looked from White's perspective. And let's maybe wrap up. While I was doing the boot camp, I caught a cough. This is what happens when you talk for so long. So I hope that you found this to be instructive. And the bottom line is, I think it's a very solid system. So remember a couple of principles. I think they're going to get you really far. That black should include h6, why he should include h6, that why you should sometimes put a knight on f3, why the knight on e2. So most of the time you want to play knight f3. Again, remember why. If your bishop is not on h4, and if black can play knight e4, you can retreat with the bishop on f4. And that's actually, it's preferable. But if your bishop is already on h4, this is why you now transpose to the knight g to e2 setup. And this is the reason. It's not random. This is why people are playing knight f3. This is why people are playing knight e2, because normally I think everybody would be playing knight f3 if not for this knight e4 idea. Yeah, probably I forgot something. And again, the purpose of this bootcamp was not to make like a full course. Like if this was a full course, I would be doing this on Chessable, naturally, and maybe I will at some point, we'll see. But I just wanted to explain you the ideas, popularize the system a bit, maybe also research a bit myself, and who knows, maybe I'm going to play it myself in the future. Like I have looked at the London lines, one of my recent bootcamps, but I have never really played it. But I can't wait to try it myself in my over-the-board and online games. And the last line, the last thought, support the authors. I think it's very important, even though I am providing a free content to you, and I hope you're finding it to be useful. Find the time to support the authors who are making amazing courses, should it be on Chessable or some other platforms like Modern Chess, because they're much more in depth than my bootcamps. But maybe for some it's already enough with just my bootcamps. If you need the PGN, you can purchase it separately. I will leave the link in the video description. It goes straight to my Patreon in the shop section. I'm going to make some sort of a symbolic price. Again, do not please expect it's going to be fully annotated with million model games, whatever. This is not like a paid commercial course. It's just my source file that I created for this bootcamp, and maybe for some this is going to help to build their own repertoire. Are you using either chess.com, leeches, or any other studies where you can build your opening tree? Last and final note, once again, big thanks to Millennium, who helped me to create this bootcamp. Amazing board. I absolutely love to work on it, and I intend to continue, so go check it out. And yeah, thank you for watching this. It's been almost, how many, 3 hours? Maybe it's more than 3 hours. Leave a comment if you enjoyed it, and have a great day.